Chapter 719. Looking at everyone's expression, Tan Xiao lightly smiled and said, "As long as you work hard, I'll give each of you an interspatial ring when you reach the late stage of Golden Core." "Thank you, boss." Jean Sher and the other 9 looked pleasantly surprised and cupped their fists to express their gratitude. The smile on Tan Xiao's face turned a bit brighter. Although refining an interspatial ring required several precious materials, among which the void crack stone was very difficult to find, the Everlasting Feast Hall had recently purchased a lot of precious ores. He found that they had bought more than a dozen fist-sized void crack stones from the list of materials Gu Xiaoxue sent him. At this moment, it was a good opportunity to win people's hearts, and he didn't want to waste it. Tan Xiao had already packed all the suitcases that Xie Jiqiang was going to take away into his interspatial ring. After Mo All packed all the prohibited items and explosives in the underground base into his interspatial ring, everyone silently left with the help of the invisibility talisman. Although gunshots were heard inside, they were tens of meters deep underground and couldn't be heard from the outside. Hence, the brutal massacre was not known by outsiders. However, the burning of the 6 SUVs still attracted the attention of some people nearby, such as the people from the National Intelligence Department. Chen Bing. He was the frontline soldier fighting in the intelligence network. He had carried out many missions overseas and had achieved excellent results. Not long ago, he was transferred back to the country. Due to the many tragedies in Shanghai, he was transferred here. After his investigation, he had determined that Kanuksha Pharmaceuticals, a subsidiary of the Mind Assembly Technology, was a major suspect. It was likely to be the hiding place of the number 3 leader of a foreign SOE company, Austin Cole. "Have you contacted that mouse guy?" Standing at the entrance of Kanuksha Pharmaceuticals, Chen Bing looked at the vigilant eyes of the 4 ordinary security guards and asked the person next to him. "Not yet. He seems to have vanished from the face of the earth. We can't find him. Keep looking. Be sure to contact him," Chen Bing said and turned to the car parked on the roadside. Although he didn't know what happened inside Kanuksha Pharmaceuticals and why there was a short burst of fire, he didn't intend to give up on gathering information. However, it was nearly 4 a.m. now, and the security guards inside Kanuksha Pharmaceuticals should be the most vigilant. He waited. After daybreak, when the security guards inside thought that no one would sneak in quietly, they would sneak in unexpectedly and spy on the information. That was the best time. Blue Star Villa Complex, Tan Xiao had just returned home when he received a call from Mouse. After listening to Mouse's report, Tan Xiao was silent for a while and then slowly said, "Can you confirm the identity of the other party?" Mouse said, "I can't figure it out for the time being. But I suspect that he is from the National Intelligence Agency. Last night, there was a fierce battle near Kanuksha Pharmaceutical Company, so they should be the most nervous ones. Plus, the 2 armored warriors were able to heavily injure the special forces. They must be panicking." Tan Xiao slowly said, "Drag it out. You can contact the other party again in the morning. If the other party wants to buy information from you, just tell them that Xie Jiqiang has fled abroad. As for how he escaped, just say that you don't know. Also, tell them that SOE's people have already left. Last night, someone was burning a corpse in Kanuksha Pharmaceuticals. Don't tell them the identity of the corpse, just say it's a foreigner." "I understand. But," Rat replied with a hesitant tone. "If you have something to say, just say it." "I don't like to beat around the bush," Tan Xiao said. Mouse quickly said, "Boss, I sold the information to the military before. If I sell the information you told me to the other party, I'm afraid it will arouse their vigilance. Once this matter is over, I'm afraid they will investigate me." Tan Xiao said, "I'll send someone to escort you out of Shanghai tonight. The intelligence network in the surrounding cities will need to be opened. Go to Changxi and stay there for 2 days before moving to another city. Also, I'll send 2 experts to protect you and teach you some disguise techniques." "Thank you, boss," said Mouse quickly. Tan Xiao hung up the phone and brought Mo All to his study. He took out 6 large suitcases and a small suitcase from his interspatial ring and opened the small suitcase first. Inside the suitcase, there was a foam base with 6 bottles of green particles inlaid in the deep groove. "Boss, are these the gene particles?" Mo picked up a bottle and asked curiously after repeatedly observing it for a while. "They should be the gene particles, else Xie Jiqiang wouldn't be so cautious," said Tan Xiu. "However, we still don't know if the gene particles have any side effects, so we must test it first. I've already thought of someone to test it on the way back." "Who are you going to test it on, boss?" asked Mo, confused. "I'll find a way to get a batch of prisoners on death row from some domestic prisons in the near future," said Tan Xiu. "In any case, they're going to die soon, so it's best to use them for the test." Mo's expression changed as he said with a solemn expression, "The prisons in our country are somewhat different from those abroad. Whether it's the management system or the attitude of the internal staff, it's very difficult to get prisoners on death row. Why don't I personally make a trip to another country? In other countries, as long as they have enough money, they can get enough prisoners." Tan Xiu gave it a thought and felt that Mo's words made sense. He didn't want to cause trouble in the country, especially not involving the government. It would be very appropriate if he could spend money to get some prisoners on death row from some foreign prisons. "Oh, which prison do you think is suitable?" "What's the purpose of your test, boss?" asked Mo. "What I mean is, once the gene particles are used for the test and it turns out that there are no side effects, and it can greatly increase the strength of the people being tested. How would you deal with them then? There are a lot of options if you want to kill them directly. A large number of prisoners die in the world's top 10 most brutal prisons every year. But if you don't want to kill them and want to put them in an important position, then you'll need to screen them carefully. I can be ruthless toward my enemies." Tan Xiu forced a smile. "But it's hard for me to deal with those who have not offended me. If the gene particles have no side effects, I can consider putting them in an important position." After careful consideration, Mo finally said, "If that's the case, then there's a prison that's very suitable. Labor Camp 1319, Israel." This was a concentration camp for high-risk prisoners, and the entire prison's information was very confidential. Owen had once gone to this prison to assassinate a notorious arms dealer. According to our previous investigation, Labor Camp 1319 is just a large prison in Israel on the surface, but only a few people know that 16 countries of the United Nations have signed a top-secret agreement. More than 60% of the world's most brutal and terrifying prisoners will be secretly escorted there. "You mean, the prisoners there are all terrifying figures?" Tan Xiu was surprised. "Almost everyone's hands are stained with blood, and 80% of the prisoners imprisoned there will die there." Mo nodded. "The number of prisoners in this camp is not many. There were only 1,200 of them 5 years ago. But if all of them are released and thrown into any country, I believe that country will be plunged into a huge turmoil. The world's top assassin organization, the Spectre of Evernight, was destroyed 11 years ago. Its top terrorist assassin, Spectre, is also a terrifying figure that makes the world's leaders turn pale at the mere mention of his name. Butcher, who killed more than 1,000 people with his own hands, is also imprisoned there. Since he's so powerful, why didn't he escape?" Tan Xiu frowned. "It's not easy to enter Labor Camp 1319, and it's even more difficult to get out." Mo forced a smile. "An and I, along with 6 other experts of our everlasting feast hall, used every trick and scheme to sneak on inside. In order to let on escape, we cooperated with each other from the inside and outside, yet we still paid the price of 1 dead and 5 seriously injured to barely succeed." "Hiss," Tan Xiu couldn't help but gasp. He was very clear about the strength of Mo and Mo. Even before they became martial cultivators, they were still very powerful. He didn't expect that they would pay such a big price just to assassinate a target. Tan Xiu lit a cigarette. Halfway through, he asked the question he was most concerned about, "Since this prison is so terrifying, I'm afraid it won't be easy to get the death row prisoners out, right?" Money makes the world go round, said Moo. It won't be a problem as long as we can afford it. How much money do you think we need to spend to get Spectre out? Asked Tan Xiu. It's too difficult without 9 digits, said Moo with a forced smile. I'm talking about US dollars, said Moo with a bitter smile. At least 100 million US dollars? Tan Xiu's pupils shrunk and he asked in amazement. I once heard some news that Spectre had an enemy who was willing to pay 100 million US dollars to go to that prison. His purpose was very simple, to kill him for revenge. As a result, not only did that guy fail to take his revenge, he even lost his life. You mean, Spectre killed that guy in the prison? Asked Tan Xiu. That's right. Moo nodded. A smile appeared on Tan Xiu's face as he said, that's very interesting. I'm interested in Spectre now. Let's wait and see. I'm very poor now, and it's simply a pipe dream for me to get someone out of that prison. The most important thing now is to get some money. Shortly after, Tan Xiu opened the other 6 suitcases. 2 of them contained a variety of exquisite instruments, a total of dozens of them. The other 4 big suitcases were filled with all kinds of information. Interesting. Aside from the data of the gene particles, there's even the research data of the armor. It seems like the harvest this time is not only the gene particles. Chapter 720. Tan Xiu had seen the armor worn by the genetic warriors. The whole set of armor was composed of several parts. Although they were connected as one, the joints were connected very well during a fight. Their movements weren't sluggish, and their attack power and explosive power were definitely multiplied. Oh, you should have taken off the armor worn by those genetic warriors, right? Asked Tan Xiu as he put the documents back into the box. Except for 4 sets of heavily damaged armor, I've stored the other 23 sets in my interspatial ring, said Moo. With that said, his mind moved and a brand new armor suddenly appeared in his hand. The armor was neatly folded and stored in a white transparent bag. It was obvious that it had never been worn by a genetic warrior before. Try it on. Tan Xiu's expression moved and immediately ordered Moo. After putting on the entire set of armor, he felt it and said, this armor is not light, boss. It should weigh about 40 kilograms. If an ordinary person were to wear it, let alone fighting, even walking would become sluggish. Those genetic warriors have enhanced strength, so they're suitable to wear this armor. But for us cultivators, this kind of armor is of little value. Do you think anyone will buy this armor if you sell it? Asked Tan Xiu with a nod. Private armed forces are not suitable for this equipment. If you want to sell it, it's best to sell it to the military, said Moo decisively. Tan Xiu didn't want to have too much involvement with the military, at least not now. After thinking for a moment, he took out his mobile and dialed Yuan Jingshuan's number. Tan Xiu, why did you get up so early? Yuan Jingshuan's voice came from the phone. I didn't disturb your rest, did I, Uncle Yuan? Tan Xiu said with a smile. I just need your help with something, so I called you at this time. What is it? Asked Yuan Jingxian. I have a suit of armor that can be used to equip warriors, and I even have the research and development data on it. Haven't you been dealing with the military before? So I want to ask if you can help me sell this armor to the military. Yuan Jingxian was confused. Equip the metal warrior's armor. As far as I know, the military is also researching this type of armor, but I haven't heard of any major progress. Tan Xiu, I won't ask about the origin of this armor, but you have to tell me, how much are you going to sell it for? Tan Xiu thought for a moment and said, I'll sell it as a package. 2 sets of finished armors, plus the detailed information on the successful development, for 500 million. Yuan Jingxian said, the price is not cheap. How about this? We can't talk about it over the phone, and I haven't seen the armor, so I can't determine its specific value. You should be in Shanghai now, right? I'll rush over today. Let's talk when we meet. Alright, thanks for your hard work, Uncle Yuan. The call ended. Tan Xiu took a new set of armor from Mo and put it inside his interspatial ring along with the documents. Then, he said, contact the logistics staff of the Everlasting Feast Hall's HQ in Jingmen Island. Tell them that I ordered them to send 11 medicinal pills that can increase cultivation. You've suffered a great loss tonight. Consider it a benefit for you. Mo's eyes lit up as he complied and left. After putting away the gene particles, Tan Xiu went to the cloakroom and took a set of clean clothes. He then took a bath and changed into them. Since it was still early, he cultivated for 2 hours before he drove out. As he arrived at the Thompson villa where Shuiyu lived, a strong fragrance of medicated cuisine greeted his nostrils. I thought you wouldn't come so early. The medicated cuisine will take more than an hour. Shuiyu was no longer in pajamas, but dressed up beautifully. Her presence added a beautiful scenery to the villa. Tan Xiu took off his coat and nodded, then I'll wait for a while. I haven't had breakfast yet. Ah, by the way, I want to ask you something. Do you know the origin of the 6 starlight array? Shuiyu thought for a moment and slowly said, I've read a lot of information and confirmed that the 6 starlight array originated from the Solomon Islands. But I don't know whether the records in the ancient records are true or not. However, I found an interesting thing when I read it. Rumor has it that the 6 starlight array is an array used by a demon god to suppress his subordinates. It's like a cage. A cage? Tan Xiu pondered for a long while before he finally shook his head. He felt that this rumor was unreliable. The 6 starlight array contained profound mysteries and was very different from traditional arrays. He would believe it if it was created by a cultivator of another system, but to say that a demon god used a cage to suppress his subordinates was a bit of a nonsense. Whoever created the 6 starlight array, I'm afraid that his strength is quite terrifying. Perhaps when I reach the peak of the supremacy stage in the immortal world, I might not necessarily be his match. Also, the person who arranged the 6 starlight array in the cave in Kana's Longquan Bay is probably very powerful. Tan Xiu suddenly had the urge to return to Kana's, but he had a lot of things to deal with in the near future, so he could only suppress the impulse and wait for the recent matters to be dealt with before he went there again. Perhaps, standing in front of the 6 starlight array again would produce an unexpected effect in cracking its mysteries. Time fleeted by. As the medicated diet was served on the dining table, Shuiyu accompanied Tan Xiu to finish eating. After washing the dishes and chopsticks, she suddenly said before going out, Tan Xiu, I'm going back to the Miao region in a few days. What are you going to do there? Asked Tan Xiu. First, I want to tell my parents that I'm already your woman, said Shuiyu. They want to remove my name from the genealogy and move my household registration to yours. Also, I need to walk around the Miao region to look for some precious medicinal herbs. What? Tan Xiu didn't expect that Shuiyu would make such a decision. Moving her household registration to his household registration. How should he settle her? Was it possible that he would have to put her household registration in his household registration book? About that, there's no need to go through so much trouble, is there? Asked Tan Xiu with some hesitation. This is the ancestral home, so I must do it. Shuiyu shook her head and said, else I'll be ridiculed by my clansmen, thinking that I'm a trash abandoned by a man. You can rest assured that I'll just move my household registration to yours, so it won't affect you. It's because I asked a friend to help me buy a house in Star City. That friend of mine has some power in Star City, so moving my household registration will be very easy. Tan Xiu suddenly understood and said, I'll send someone to help you with the matter of moving your household registration. There's no need to trouble your friend. As for the medicinal herbs in the Miao region, are there a lot of them? The Miao region is rich in medicinal herbs. Shuiyu nodded and said, some of them are sparsely populated, but the geographical location is very dangerous. There are a lot of precious medicinal herbs growing there. In the past, our people in the Miao region would organize pharmacists to go to some relatively safe places to pick medicinal herbs every year. Tan Xiu thought for a moment and then said, tell me before you leave. I'll send 2 experts to accompany you. Shuiyu nodded, but then shook her head and said, I must tell you before I leave, because I can't go back with my whole body. As for sending someone to protect me, there's no need for that since it's not convenient. What do you mean by you can't go back with your whole body? Tan Xiu was confused. A blush appeared on Shui Yu's ears. She didn't dare to look straight at Tan Xiu. After hesitating for a moment, she said in a low voice, that is to say, I'll lose my virginity. Tan Xiu instantly understood and a trace of embarrassment appeared on his face. After a dry cough, he waved his hand and said, I know what you're worried about. Don't worry. The people I'll send to protect you are women, and they're also cultivators. If you want to find precious medicinal herbs in the Miao region, you'll inevitably go to some dangerous places. Having them to protect you will make you feel safer. All right. Shui Yu gently nodded and took a white mink coat from the rack at the door. She then picked up a pair of sunglasses from the cabinet and asked after putting them on, do you need them? Tan Xiu didn't have the habit of wearing sunglasses, so he shook his head and pushed the door to go out. Shanghai's medicinal herbs market was located on Xiafei Road in Dongpu District. Tan Xiu had been here before and was quite familiar with the place. After finding a good place to park the car, he and Shui Yu entered the medicinal herbs market together. The medicinal herbs market was not crowded since it was not a holiday. Aside from the stall owners and assistants, there were only a few elderly people or customers who came to buy medicinal herbs. What about that fruit, boss? Tan Xiu followed Shui Yu to a stall. Shui Yu quickly glanced at it and asked with a frown. The store's owner was young and looked to be in his 30s. He wore a down jacket, jeans, and a cap on his head. Upon seeing Shui Yu's arrival along with a young man with an extraordinary bearing, he faintly regretted it, but still, he said, I'll sell it. Didn't we have a deal yesterday? Shui Yu's expression turned a bit ugly. I brought the money to buy it today, so leave it for me for a day. The shop owner probed, do you really want to spend 4 million to buy that hoarfrost fruit? Of course I do, answered Shui Yu without hesitation. If I didn't want to, would I still be able to come back here today? The shop owner looked regretful and bitterly said, I asked you for a deposit yesterday, but you only gave me 200 yuan. I thought you were just teasing me. Besides, I thought you were lying when you said you would come here today, so I sold that hoarfrost fruit. I'm so depressed that I lost 800,000 yuan. I really only brought 200 yuan in cash yesterday. Asked Shui Yu. You sold that fruit for 2 million. The shop owner awkwardly said, yeah. I know that the price of a hoarfrost fruit should be around 4 to 5 million yuan, but that hoarfrost fruit of mine has obviously been stored for a long time, so a lot of its medicinal efficacy should have been lost. So old man Huo was willing to spend 2 million to buy it. I sold it to him. Who's that old man Huo? Asked Shui Yu quickly. Chapter 721. The shop owner pointed to the corner in the distance and said, he's the owner of the best shop in the corner over there. He's also in the medicinal herbs business. Almost all the people who have been doing business in this medicinal herbs market all year round know him. You can go there and ask. You'll know. All right. Shui Yu replied. She then pulled Tan Xiu's arm and left. She had a bad impression of this shop owner. Such a short-sighted person. Not only did he not keep his promise, but he also sold the treasure at such a cheap price, which really disgusted her. Tan Xiu had never heard the name of the singular recherche fruit, nor did he know how good it was. Although Shui Yu had explained the curative effect of the singular recherche fruit, he only regarded it as a relatively precious spirit fruit. Don't worry. Since we know who bought it, it's possible to buy it back. At worst, the price will be higher. We can afford it, comforted Tan Xiu. With a firm look in her eyes, Shui Yu said, I must buy the singular recherche fruit even if there's only a slim chance. I'm confident that I can make you the most sumptuous medicated diet after I get it. Medicated diet? The corner of Tan Xiu's mouth couldn't help but twitch twice. Spending millions to buy a precious spirit fruit just to make a sumptuous medicated diet for him, this Shuiyu really didn't regard money as money. However, this kind of thing was not common. He didn't feel like scolding Shuiyu. After all, she spent a lot of money to buy it for his sake. Treasure collection shop. It was a very ordinary shop with a very ordinary inlaid plaque on its door. The entire medicinal herbs store was very big, but the inside looked particularly empty. Except for two young clerks, a man and a woman, who were playing with their mobile phones in a bored manner, there was no one else. The young man was the first to see Tan Xiao and Shuiyu. However, his eyes only stayed on Tan Xiao for a moment before shifting to Shuiyu. He couldn't move his eyes away for a long time. Ever since Shuiyu took off her veil, she had been accustomed to strange men staring at her, so she didn't mind and asked in a cold voice, "We're looking for Boss Hua." The young man seemed to have just woken up from a dream. His pretty face instantly turned red. He had seen beautiful women before, but he had never seen one as beautiful as Shuiyu. After all, he was still young and lacked self-control. Therefore, he awkwardly stammered as he recalled his gaffe just now, "Old Hua, our boss, he's upstairs receiving guests." Shuiyu gently nodded and said, "Can you take us up? We want to make a deal with your boss." "Oh, all right, please follow me." In order to hide his embarrassment, the young man stammered a reply and turned to jog toward the stairs. When he just stepped on 2 steps, he suddenly realized that he was running a little too fast, and the guests seemed to be unable to keep up. At once, he paused for a few seconds and secretly glanced back before slowing down his pace to go upstairs. A smile was revealed on the corner of Tan Xiao's mouth. He was well aware of the young shop assistant's performance. If he hadn't experienced 10,000 years of cultivation in the immortal world and was still the same young man as before, his performance would probably not be any better than this young shop assistant. On the 2nd floor. Hua Siming's office was located in the innermost part. Usually, apart from receiving important guests, ordinary people were not allowed to enter this office. The decoration here was very exquisite, and the wooden furniture and cabinets were also very well placed. Sitting on the mahogany coffee table, Hua Siming stroked his white beard as his astute eyes constantly glanced at the guests who were appraising the medicinal herbs on the opposite chairs. 2 guests, the hoarfrost fruit is definitely a good thing. I've been operating in this medicinal herb market for so many years, but I've only got 2 hoarfrost fruits in total. This is the second one. Moreover, the 6.5 million I quoted is absolutely fair. Of the 2 guests, one was an energetic old man in a traditional Chinese suit and the other was a charming young woman. If someone who had participated in the underground fighting competition was here, they would definitely be able to recognize her. She was the host of the underground fighting competition. Black Widow. The old man in the tang suit stared at the spirit fruit in his hand and secretly despised it. Hua Siming mistakenly thought that this spirit fruit was a hoarfrost fruit, but he was very clear that this was a singular relic fruit that was very similar to the hoarfrost fruit. However, he came to Shanghai's medicinal herb market this time to look for the Millennium Wild Ginseng, but he didn't expect to encounter such a precious spirit fruit. The most important thing was that he seemed to be able to pick up a big bargain. He was too lazy to tell Hua Siming the true value of this singular relic fruit. Knock, knock, the door of the office was knocked. The young shop assistant carefully opened the door and poked his head in to look inside. When his eyes fell on Hua Siming, he immediately pushed the door open and said, "Boss, there are 2 distinguished guests. They said they want to make a deal with you." Hua Siming didn't expect that a well-behaved shop assistant would rush in. He was about to scold him, but after hearing his words, Hua Siming suppressed the anger in his heart and asked in confusion, "Distinguished guests? Make a deal? Who are they?" At the door, Tan Xiao and Shuiyu appeared. As they entered the room, Shuiyu's eyes instantly fell on the singular relic fruit in the hands of the old man in the tang suit. A glint flashed in her eyes as she said, "You're Boss Hua, right? My name is Shuiyu, and I want to buy that spirit fruit from you." Hua Siming was stunned and a series of question marks appeared on his forehead. He happened to find the hoarfrost fruit yesterday and spent some money to buy it. He didn't expect that he would encounter two groups of guests interested in the hoarfrost fruit this morning. However, this was a good thing. Hua Siming was a bit excited. There was a market only when there was competition. If these two groups of people were determined to get the hoarfrost fruit, then they would definitely compete with each other on the price, and he would be the one who would benefit in the end. The old man in the tang suit turned his head and looked at Tan Xiu and Shuiyu. Before Hua Siming could speak, he said, "Young lady, you came at a bad time. I've taken a fancy to this hoarfrost fruit. You can look elsewhere if you need it." Hua Siming's expression slightly changed and he quickly said, "You didn't say that you want to buy it, old Mr. Situ. Since you didn't say that you want to buy it, then they have the hope to buy it. You see, they have already given their answer. This." The old man in the tang suit slightly furrowed his brows and a cold light flashed in his eyes. How could he not hear that Hua Siming wanted him to compete with the two young people who just came? Although he didn't like Hua Siming's means, he had to admit that he didn't agree to buy it. He somewhat regretted it, but now was not the time to do so. Let alone 5 million, he would buy it even if it was 65 million. However, he didn't want to be a sucker, so he slowly got up and looked at Tan Xiu and Shuiyu, saying, "Both of you, no matter what you do, you should pay attention to the order of arrival, first served. This hoarfrost fruit is already in my hands, and I also intend to buy it. Therefore, I hope you won't get involved." Black Widow didn't know Tan Xiu. After all, there were many guests during the underground fighting match, and she didn't have the time to remember everyone. As the old man in the tang suit got up, she also hurriedly got up and looked at Tan Xiu and Shuiyu, saying, "Gentlemen, let me introduce you. This is Senior Situ Hung of the Situ family in the imperial capital. Even the Situ family's patriarch has to call him second uncle." Shuiyu frowned. She could hear that the old man introduced Situ Hung to use the Situ family to put pressure on them. Similarly, Tan Xiu, who stood next to Shuiyu, could also hear the meaning. "Situ Hung. You must be determined to get it, right?" asked Tan Xiu slowly. "That's right. I need this hoarfrost fruit." Situ Hung nodded. "Boss Hua and I have reached an agreement on the price." Tan Xiu shook his head and said, "If that's the case, then I'll eat less medicated cuisine. I have some friendship with your Situ family, after all, so I can't reject your face at this time." Presumptuous. Black Widow's expression changed and she angrily rebuked. A bit of anger appeared on Situ Hung's face, along with a bit of astonishment in his eyes. He didn't expect that Tan Xiu wanted to buy this singular recherche fruit just to eat a medicated cuisine. It must be noted that even if they didn't recognize it as a singular recherche fruit and bought it as a hoarfrost fruit, it would still cost 5 to 6 million yuan. Hua Siming felt a bit regretful inwardly. He thought that these two young men would compete with Situ Hung on the price, and he would eventually benefit from it. He didn't expect that the young man would directly admit defeat. Sighing inwardly, he waved and said, "Since you can't afford to buy it, then go downstairs and wait for me. I'll entertain these two guests first, and then I'll entertain you later." Shuiyu was a bit unwilling, but after hearing Hua Siming's order to expel them, she hesitantly said, "Tan Xiu, I really want to." Tan Xiu interrupted her. "Wasn't it just a medicated cuisine? It was fine to eat it once, but there was no need for him to challenge the Situ family's elders for such a trivial matter. Besides, he was very poor now. Apart from the 10 million yuan he had given to Shuiyu, he only had 2 million yuan in his bank account. Once he went tit for tat with Situ Hung on the price, he would be the one who would lose face in the end. "Let's go." Tan Xiu reached out to grab Shuiyu's shoulder and turned to walk toward the door. "Wait." Situ Hung's complexion slightly changed as he chased after Tan Xiu and called out. Tan Xiu turned around and said with dissatisfaction, "We've given up." "What else do you want?" Situ Hung said with a probing tone, "This young lady just called you Tan Xiu. Are you the young divine doctor of Star City Chinese Medical Hospital, Tan Xiu?" Tan Xiu lightly said, "I never thought that I'm quite famous." Even the second uncle of the Situ family's patriarch knows my name. Situ Hong's complexion completely changed. A complicated expression appeared in his eyes as he said, "It turns out to be you, Grandmaster Tang. I didn't know your identity, Great Guru Tang, so I hope you can forgive me if I offended you. I do want to buy this hoarfrost fruit, but I'd like to give it to you as an apology." Chapter 722. Upon hearing Situ Hong's words, Tan Xiu was stunned. But then, he realized that this man probably knew about his identity as a cultivator. After all, whether it was the talismans he sold to the Situ family, or the matter of him killing Jin Sanqi, Jin Sijie, and Daoist Qianquan, as well as sending people to wipe out the 8 major families of the Strange Doors, it was likely that the Strange Doors family had already investigated it. "He's afraid of me." Tan Xiu shot a deep look at Situ Hong and found fear surging in his eyes. He immediately forced a wry smile inwardly. At the side, Shuiyu stared blankly with a surprised look on her face. Hua Siming was even more dumbfounded. He really couldn't figure out why such an old man would buy a precious spirit fruit out of his own pocket and then give it to someone else for free. The most ridiculous thing was that he seemed to be afraid that the other party wouldn't accept it, so he even apologized. Black Widow, on the other hand, was dumbfounded with a look of disbelief in her eyes. She simply couldn't believe her ears. In her eyes, the most distinguished ancestor of the Situ family, who she considered to be aloof and remote, actually spoke to Tan Xiu with honorifics. What was most unacceptable to her was that this ancestor of the Situ family seemed to be afraid of the young man in front of her, and even flattered him. What kind of situation was this? Could it be that with the status of the Situ family and the ability of this ancestor, there was no one in the entire Huaxia that could make him dread? Black Widow was afraid that Situ Hong was old and muddled, so she immediately reminded him after sobering up, "Senior Situ, did you make a mistake?" "I'm not muddle-headed, nor did I make a mistake," said Situ Hong resolutely. "My attitude toward Grandmaster Tang just now was a big mistake, and I must correct it. That's why I must compensate Grandmaster Tang with this spirit fruit." With that said, he chased after Tan Xiu and presented the singular recherche fruit with both hands, saying, "Grandmaster Tang, please don't stoop to my level and be magnanimous. I'm sincerely apologizing. I hope you can accept it and give me a chance to make up for my mistake." Tan Xiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at Situ Hong. Since Situ Hong had already said so much, Tan Xiu didn't want to refuse again. After taking the singular recherche fruit, he smiled and said, "Situ Hong, right? The people of the Situ clan are really good, and they always satisfy me. Fine, I'll accept this singular recherche fruit." Situ Hong's face lit up with joy. He said from the bottom of his heart, "It's my honor that you can accept it. It's almost noon, I wonder if I can have the honor to invite Master Tang for a meal." Tan Xiu thought for a while before shaking his head and said, "Forget it. I still have something to do later, so I'll skip the meal. However, for the sake of this singular recherche fruit, I will give you a big gift. In half a month, you'd better go to Hong Kong and look for Li Juren. I'm sure you'll find something there." Li Juren? Situ Hong stared blankly for a moment. He really knew Li Juren and even had a bit of friendship with him. Although he didn't know what the big gift Tan Xiu was talking about, he still respectfully said, "I'll definitely visit Li Juren personally when the time comes." Tan Xiu nodded and said goodbye before leaving with Shuiyu. The purpose of his visit to the medicinal herbs market was for this singular recherche fruit. Now that he had gotten it, he didn't want to stay here any longer. Inside the office, Situ Hong was not in a hurry to leave. His old face revealed an expression as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Even after he sat back down on the sofa, the wrinkles on his face had already stretched out, and a smile climbed onto his face. "I don't understand, Senior Situ." Black Widow gritted her teeth and said after sitting down. Hua Siming also didn't understand, so he also said, "I don't get it either. Though I know that Tang Xiu is a young divine doctor in the Chinese medical field, and even I admire him a bit, I still can't figure it out. With your identity, why would you act like this in front of him, so cautious? So respectful. So flattering. Situ Hong glanced at Hua Siming. The smile on his old face didn't change as he said, if he's an ordinary person, he's indeed not qualified to make me act like this. But who is he? Is he just a young divine doctor in the Chinese medicine industry? Ha ha ha, how honorable is his identity? That's something you can't even imagine. Forget it. It's better if you don't know some things. In short, remember that you must never offend him in the future. You must even treat him like a little ancestor. Humph. Hua Siming snorted disdainfully inwardly, but he didn't refute Situ Hong's words on the surface. He was just a medicinal herbs merchant and an old man. He wouldn't be as shameless as this Situ Hong in front of him. Also, was the Situ family very famous? He knew a lot of big families in the provinces, but he had never heard of a big family surnamed Situ. Black Widow, on the other hand, attached great importance to Situ Hong's warning. After nodding heavily, she looked at the direction of the door with a somewhat complicated expression. She knew Situ Hong's status in the Situ family. Even a casual word from him could make the Situ family's patriarch flatter him with a smile. His status in the strange doors was absolutely a figure of Mount Tai and the Big Dipper. Who wouldn't be respectful in front of him? But, who exactly was this Tan Xiu? Inside the medicinal herbs market. Tan Xiu originally intended to leave directly, but Shuiyu said that she still wanted to buy some auxiliary herbs for the medicinal cuisine. Therefore, he had no choice but to follow her to look for and buy the herbs in the shops and stalls. In just half an hour, he saw that Shuiyu had spent more than 270,000 to buy those auxiliary herbs. What a wastrel! Tan Xiu couldn't help but secretly shake his head. Finally, when the last medicinal herb Shuiyu wanted to buy was packed, she said with a slightly regretful expression, "I've bought all the herbs for the medicinal cuisine. It's a pity that this place isn't in the Miao region. Otherwise, the most important auxiliary herb, the ginseng, wouldn't need to be replaced by this artificially cultivated ordinary ginseng. I say, eldest miss, do you know the price of a wild ginseng?" Tan Xiu forced a smile. Take the Millennium Wild Ginseng, for example. It's impossible to buy it without 9 digits. You said before that the value of the singular recherche fruit is more than 9 digits. If you use the Millennium Wild Ginseng as the auxiliary herb, you'll have to spend 2 to 300 million yuan to cook a medicinal cuisine. Isn't this a wastrel? Even the richest man in the world won't be able to withstand your tossing and turning. A smile was revealed on the corner of Shuiyu's mouth. Although she was carrying a lot of medicinal herbs, she still moved closer to Tan Xiu and chuckled, "The medicinal cuisine I'm going to cook this time is not the usual one for you. According to the ancient records of my clan, this is already a divine-level medicinal cuisine. It's like a miraculous elixir that has great benefits for those who take it. Even if I want to drink it, I'm afraid I won't dare to drink too much." "Why?" Tan Xiu was puzzled. "My body's strength can't withstand the medicinal effect," said Shuiyu. Tan Xiu's eyes lit up. He pondered for a moment and resolutely said, "Since you really want to cook a perfect medicinal cuisine, then I'll follow your heart. I have the Millennium Wild Ginseng. I'll give it to you when we return to our residence." "Really?" Shuiyu's expression greatly changed and she asked excitedly. "Of course it's true. When have I, Tan Xiu, ever lied?" Tan Xiu snappily said. "But you gotta take it easy, Millennium Wild Ginseng. It's so difficult to get this kind of wild ginseng nowadays." 4 hours later. At Thompson Villa. Although Tan Xiu was sitting in the living room, a strong medicinal fragrance still drifted out from the kitchen door and floated throughout the hall. Whether it was after he came back from the immortal world or when he was in the immortal world, he had eaten a lot of delicacies. But this time, just the fragrance alone had aroused his appetite. Such a situation was really rare. "Wash your hands and eat." Shuiyu came out of the kitchen with an apron and a purple clay pot in her hand. When she came to the dining room and followed Tan Shio to wash his hands, she carefully opened the lid of the purple clay pot and quickly scooped a bowl of fragrant medicinal cuisine. After putting it in front of Tan Shio, she hurriedly said, "You're a cultivator and very powerful. So pay attention when you drink it. Don't ignore the medicinal efficacy contained in the medicinal cuisine just because of the taste." Tan Shio smiled indifferently. Just as he was about to pick up the bowl and drink it, he saw Shuiyu grab a small spoon and scooped a spoonful of medicinal cuisine from the clay pot. She then stuck out her pink tongue and carefully licked it. That's right. She licked it. Tang Xiu was accustomed to Shuiyu's solemn and aloof appearance. At this moment, seeing her lick the medicated diet with her pink and fragrant tongue unexpectedly gave him a different kind of seductive feeling. He even had a strong impulse that burst out from his lower abdomen. Damn it! Tan Xiu hurriedly lowered his head and silently recited the clear mind art to suppress the hot and dry feeling. Drinking the medicinal cuisine was the most important thing at the moment. After all, the amount of medicinal cuisine was less than 2 bowls, yet it cost a huge sum of 200 to 300 million yuan. What a waste! Tan Xiu drank a mouthful of the medicinal cuisine with a bit of heartache. When he swallowed it, a scalding hot torrent instantly burst out, as though it turned into thousands of strands of heat that flooded his limbs and 5 organs like a tide. Drink it quickly, Tan Xiu. Once the lid is opened, the medicinal efficacy in the medicinal cuisine will be lost at a much faster rate. The earlier you drink it into your stomach, the more medicinal efficacy will be retained. Shuiyu finally stopped licking the medicinal cuisine and carefully took a small sip. After drinking it, she looked at Tan Xiu and said. Tang Xiu stared blankly for a moment before gulping down all the medicated diet in the bowl. Under the worried expression of Shuiyu, he directly filled a small half bowl for her and then poured the rest of the medicated diet in the purple casserole into his own bowl and gulped it down into his stomach. Hot! After Tan Xiu drank the medicinal cuisine, the only feeling he had was heat. Not only the surface of his body, but also the inside of his body. Even his internal organs seemed to be wrapped in a monstrous heat wave. At this moment, despite Tan Xiu's strong willpower, he was still dizzy from the sudden burst of medicinal efficacy. His whole body seemed to have turned into a big furnace. Chapter 723. Tan Xiu did not have the time to comfort Shuiyu, who was panting softly beside him, nor did he have the time to investigate the condition of Shuiyu's body. His consciousness was immersed in his own body in a flash. What's the situation? Tan Xiu's consciousness brushed across his internal organs, carefully observing the bones, meridians, ligaments, muscles. To his surprise, there was no improvement compared to before, but there was not much damage either. As his consciousness entered his dantian, Tan Xiu was stunned by the changes inside. In the originally spacious dantian space, the vortex-shaped black hole had completely disappeared, replaced by a miniature world. There were countless sesame-sized suns, moons, and stars in the empty space. Those planets were of different colors: red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple, illuminating the miniature world space like a dream. Compared to the vast universe, this was indeed a miniature space, but the area was thousands of times larger than Tan Xiu's previous dantian space. Tan Xiu's consciousness spread out, and to his shock, his consciousness could cover the entire space, and even found that the space was still slowly expanding under his precise perception. In addition, Tan Xiu also saw a lush tree tens of meters high. It was the Heavenly Path universe tree that had taken root and germinated gradually. And near the tree trunk, a long sword with a colorful luster was quietly suspended. Where are the other things? There were a lot of things that Tan Xiu had put into his dantian, but at this moment, they had all disappeared without a trace. In order to figure out the reason, Tan Xiu hesitated for a moment, and then silently put the blood-guzzler dagger into his dantian space. Buzz buzz. The moment the blood-guzzler dagger entered the dantian space, a surging suction force came from the long sword, and the energy contained in the blood-guzzler dagger was swallowed by the long sword. Even the invisible energy spread to the blood-guzzler dagger, and the surface of the dagger began to corrode. What's going on? Tan Xiu quickly controlled the Bloodguzzler dagger to leave the Dantian space. What made him want to cry was that in just a few seconds, the entire Bloodguzzler dagger had been completely destroyed. In addition to being a piece of scrap iron, it no longer had the status of a divine weapon. Is it that sword? Tang Xiu's thoughts moved and instantly fused into the longsword. What made him incredulous was that he found that he could actually control the longsword with his thoughts. As he unleashed it out of his body, Tang Xiu could control it as if it was his own arm and fingers, feeling the enormous energy contained inside it. A divine weapon. This sword is definitely better than the supreme-grade immortal weapon I used when I was a paragon in the immortal world. Looks like the things that I took into my body were all devoured by this sword. At first, he felt a little heartache, but when he could officially control the longsword, his heartache instantly vanished. No matter how good an item was, it was still not as good as a divine weapon that truly belonged to him. Tan Xiu could even feel the hazy artifact spirit contained within this long sword. Its energy was very strong, but its intelligence was very weak. Only with time and continuous nourishment could it truly give birth to a sword spirit and become an immortal or divine weapon that truly belonged to him. Suddenly, Tan Xiu found that there was actually a planet in his Dantian space that was slightly larger than the other planets. The primal chaos force in his Dantian space was actually constantly merging with this planet and constantly dissipating from this planet. As he operated according to the heavenly art of cosmic genesis, the surging primal chaos force crazily surged out from the planet and entered the meridians in his body. When he collected most of the primal chaos force from his meridians into his Dantian space, it once again merged with the planet. Tang Xiu's discovery puzzled him. But after a long time of research, he found out that these so-called planets were actually the phantoms of countless stars in the starry sky of the universe that had been devoured by the massive primal chaos force. In other words, every planet was formed by energy. As long as there was more energy, the size of the planet would also be larger. In the end, it did not seem to be difficult to form a real planet. After a long time, Tang Xiu let out a bitter smile and slowly opened his closed eyes. He found that the celestial bodies were formed by primal chaos energy, a feeling of helplessness filling his heart. It was indeed a good thing for his body to evolve into a universe. After all, once this universe was truly formed, he would be the god of it. However, how much primal chaos force would be needed to accumulate tens of millions of planets into a real big planet? You're awake. It was unknown when Shuiyu had put on her bra. She was leaning sideways and holding her head while watching Tan Xiu. Although she found that Tan Xiu had woken up, she was a bit shy and blushed, but she still looked at Tan Xiu face to face. Tan Xiu was a bit embarrassed at the moment. He was forced to have Shuiyu's body at a critical moment. He could still clearly remember the pain Shuiyu had to endure at the beginning. After coughing dryly, Tan Xiu sat up and said with a dry smile, are you alright? Shuiyu also sat up and gently shook her head. I'm fine. Thank you. Shuiyu also sat up and gently shook her head. I'm fine. Thank you. Thank me. Tan Xiu was dumbfounded. He should be thanking her, shouldn't he? How did she become the one thanking him? According to what you told me before, it's not easy to sense qi, and it will take at least a year and a half to control it, said Shuiyu softly. But if you want to truly cultivate true essence, it will take at least a year or two. I don't know what method you used, but I'm sure that I've stepped into the threshold of a cultivator and already have true essence. What? Tan Xiu suddenly recalled the previous situation and immediately reached out to check Shuiyu's pulse. Half a minute later, a strange expression appeared on his face because he found that not only did Shuiyu cultivate true essence, but the amount was also quite a lot. The yin and yang harmonization actually pushed Shuiyu's cultivation to the early stage of foundation establishment. She directly skipped the qi refining stage. Tan Xiu's mouth couldn't help but twitch a few times. He felt that it was very absurd, but he had no choice but to accept the fact. Was this a blessing in disguise for Shuiyu? Shuiyu was oblivious to Tan Xiu's thoughts. A satisfied smile hung on her beautiful face as she said, I should be a cultivator now, right? When can you teach me some spells? You can learn at any time if you want to. Tan Xiu couldn't help but laugh. But first, tell me about the medicated diet. Shuiyu's expression slightly changed upon hearing it and she said in a low voice, I'm really sorry. It's also my first time cooking this medicated diet. You looked very scary and dangerous before. Are you all right now? Not only am I fine, but I also got a lot of benefits. Tan Xiu shook his head and smilingly said. I originally thought that the medicated diet I cooked at a great cost only had a lot of medicinal efficacy. I didn't expect that it actually contained a strange energy that made the space inside my body undergo earth-shaking changes. It seems that your Miao region does have a lot of good things. Then, do you want to go back with me? Shuiyu asked with a smile. Tan Xiu thought for a while and said, I'm afraid I don't have the time in the short term. Let's wait for a while. I'll go to Kana's again after I'm done with my recent affairs. I've studied the 6 starlight array and I may be able to make some new progress if I go there again. Maybe I can directly crack the 6 starlight array and take the immortal trove. Take me with you when you go to Kana's, said Shuiyu quickly. I also want to see what kind of things this immortal trove is. All right. Tan Xiu readily agreed. Suddenly, both of them fell into silence. The enchanting atmosphere made both of them a bit awkward and they didn't know what to say. After a while, Tan Xiu really couldn't stand the atmosphere and asked, Do you want to sleep for a while? Looking at the sky outside, Shuiyu nodded and said, Then let's sleep for a while. Will you accompany me? All right. The duo hugged each other and quickly fell asleep. After an unknown period of time, Tan Xiu, who was sleeping soundly, was woken up by the urgent ringtone of his mobile phone. Shuiyu, who was resting on Tan Xiu's arm, opened her eyes in a daze and asked, You got a call? Tan Xiu nodded and pulled his arm to take the mobile phone. He found that it was a call from Kang Xia. After connecting the call, he asked, What's up, Kang Xia? We've arrived in Shanghai, boss. Where are you now? Asked Kang Xia with a smile. Tan Xiu stared blankly and asked with a puzzled expression, Didn't you say you'll come here in 2 or 3 days? How come you've arrived in Shanghai in just 1 day? Kang Xia was at a loss whether she had to cry or laugh. Have you become muddle-headed, boss? It's been 3 days. Huh? Tan Xiu quickly looked at the date and found that it had indeed been 3 days. He didn't expect that drinking a bowl of medicated diet, experiencing a crisis, obtaining a benefit, taking Shuiyu as his woman, and then taking a nap for a while turned out to be such a long time. Let's go to Blue Star Villa. I'll be back later. All right. After hanging up the phone, Tan Xiu put the mobile phone on the bedside table and said, I have something to do, so I'll be leaving first. Kang Xia has arrived in Shanghai with her company's people. I need to talk to them about the bidding for the next project. Is Kang Xia the CEO of the magnificent Tang Corporation? Asked Shuiyu. Yeah. Tan Xiu nodded. She's very beautiful, said Shuiyu. Tan Xiu didn't understand the meaning of Shuiyu's words, but he had heard from that fatty, Yuan Chuling, that one must never praise another woman in front of another woman. Therefore, he didn't answer her but said with a smile, I should be free tomorrow night, so I'll come and have dinner with you. All right. Shuiyu was a bit reluctant, but she still controlled herself and nodded. Before she and Tan Xiu were husband and wife, she only occasionally thought of Tan Xiu and felt that she should miss Tan Xiu. But when it came to feelings, she only had a small liking for him and didn't have too many feelings for him. But now, it was different. She had completely given herself to Tan Xiu, whether it was her body or her heart. Therefore, even if it was only for half a day, she still felt reluctant to part with him. Put on some clothes. Tan Xiu smiled and kissed her forehead. Then, he took out a new set of clothes from his interspatial ring. Chapter 724. Blue Star Villa Complex. Kang Xia had been here more than once or twice, so the security guards didn't stop her. The two nannies in the villa treated her as the hostess and served her. A hot meal was served on the table, but Kang Xia didn't even touch her chopsticks. When Tan Xiu returned home and saw Kang Xia in the dining room, he walked over and sat opposite her with a smile. "What are you thinking about?" Kang Xia came back to her senses and a smile appeared on her beautiful face. She then said, "It's nothing. I just feel very tired recently, so I want to go abroad to relax after I'm done with the bidding." Tan Xiu nodded and smilingly said, "You can arrange the time yourself. But tell me in advance before you go. I need to send more people to protect you. I already have enough bodyguards." Kang Xia shook her head. "That's because you think they're enough, but I don't think so." Tan Xiu sighed. "Relatively speaking, it's very safe in the country. Those bodyguards can protect you both in the light and in the dark. But it's different when you go abroad. Many forces all over the world are now eyeing several products of our magnificent Tang Corporation. Once you step out of the country, I'm sure many forces will target you in just a few days. They will even pay a huge price to attack and kidnap you." Kang Xia slightly furrowed her brows. She thought for a moment and then said, "Then forget it. I won't give myself a holiday. But it's all right. I can recommend a good place for you." Tan Xiu said with a smile. "Where is it?" Kang Xia asked. "It's our future headquarters, 9 Dragons Island," said Tan Xiu. "Yin is there now." Kang Xia's eyes lit up and she said with anticipation, "I know you bought 9 Dragons Island and are now renovating it. But I haven't been there until now." "Alright, then I'll go to 9 Dragons Island to have some fun." Tan Xiu nodded with a smile and greeted Kang Xia to have a meal. The two chatted while eating, and it didn't take long for the lunch to be finished. After returning to the living room, Tan Xiu learned from Kang Xia that all the senior executives of the magnificent Tang Corporation who came to Shanghai with her were arranged to stay at the Paradise Manor. What made Tan Xiu even more surprised was that Kang Xia also held the bidding meeting in the Paradise Manor. "Why did you put it there?" Tan Xiu asked in confusion. Kang Xia replied in a soft voice, "Aren't we short on money now? Every penny should be used wisely. Anyway, Paradise Manor isn't an outsider's property, so we should keep the goodies to ourselves. The last time Ouyang Lulu called me to ask for wine, she didn't even try to be polite. So, it's always a good thing to be able to reduce some expenses." Cough, cough. Tan Xiu was a bit embarrassed upon hearing this. He could sense a trace of resentment in Kang Xia's tone. However, he instantly thought of another matter. She said she was tired and wanted to go abroad to relax. Could it be because of me and Ouyang Lulu? Thinking of this, Tan Xiu had a headache. The relationship between a man and a woman was too complicated. He had already shot the arrow, and there was no turning back. It was just that he felt somewhat sorry for Kang Xia. Kang Xia's eyes turned dark. From Tan Xiu's expression, she realized that Ouyang Lulu's words were true. Although she had already prepared herself for it, there was still a deep feeling of sadness and depression inside her heart. Tan Xiu sighed inside. He knew that this was not the time to be silent, so he stood up and pulled Kang Xia. Holding her hand, they walked out of the door. "Where are we going?" As Tan Xiu took out the car key and opened the door, Kang Xia finally asked. Tan Xiu said, "You've been busy with the company's affairs, so I believe that you rarely go out shopping. In any case, there's nothing else to do in the afternoon, so you can put down your work first. I'll accompany you to go shopping." Kang Xia understood Tan Xiu's meaning. He was apologizing to her. Speaking of which, she and Tan Xiu had been together for a long time, but the number of times Tan Xiu accompanied her to go shopping was actually very few. Shopping, eating delicacies, and watching movies. Throughout the afternoon and evening, Tan Xiu and Kang Xia were inseparable, leaving their footprints in many bustling areas of Shanghai. It was not until the early hours of the morning that they returned to the Blue Star Villa complex. Following that, the matter between a man and a woman was in full swing until the two were exhausted and satisfied. What the two of them didn't know was that when they were satisfied, in a luxurious business room of Shanghai's Wenj Road Hotel, a white-haired young man couldn't sleep at night and smoked bitterly. Chen Zixue, Zhejiang Province's Sinyuan Group's general manager, a millionaire with tens of billions of assets. He was the idol of many young talents and also a diamond bachelor in the eyes of many women. A semi-finished product. Will it work? With a cigarette in one hand and a cup of water in the other, he looked distressed. Sinyuan Group could become one of the top 10 construction companies in the country, and it was inseparable from his personal ability. But at this moment, he was somewhat at a loss. He was not old, only 29 years old. 8 years ago, he was young and frivolous. He was definitely the leader of the rich and playboys in Zhejiang Province, and his reputation was in shambles. He originally thought that he could squander his youth freely and enjoy a good life, but the result was that the sky above his head collapsed. The previous general manager of Sinyuan Group's father died because of a cerebral hemorrhage, and the huge pressure suddenly fell on him. Although it didn't make him collapse, it still made his hair turn white overnight. The inheritance rights of 75% of the entire Sinyuan Group's shares made him the general manager who countless people were waiting to laugh at. 8 years, he changed his former playboy style and crazily learned all kinds of knowledge, constantly filling in his shortcomings. It was as if he was bewitched. In the first year when he took over as general manager of Sinyuan Group, the company's stock index plummeted by nearly 20%, and the company's assets shrunk severely. In the second year when he took over, the company's income and expenses were balanced, and it could be said that it didn't make any losses or profits. In the third year, through an extremely risky merger and the opening sale of a new building, he earned back the losses of the first year when he took over, and there was still some surplus. The fourth year. The fifth year. The Sinyuan Group's income continued to increase, and it could even be described as skyrocketing. Pieces of land were bought by them, residential areas were opened for sale, and commercial buildings were sold. In 8 years, the total assets of the Sinyuan Group had skyrocketed by more than 10 times. Chen Zixue had also become a famous real estate tycoon in the domestic business world, with a resounding reputation. Ring, 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 his mobile phone's ringtone sounded, causing Chen Zixue's expression to change. He quickly took out his mobile phone to answer the call and asked in a deep voice, "Did you find it?" "I found it." After a while, Chen Zixue hung up the phone, but then dialed another number. Blue Star Villa Complex. Tan Xiao had just fallen asleep when he was woken up by the urgent ringtone of his mobile phone. He looked at Kang Xia, who was still sleeping soundly. Tan Xiao helplessly grabbed his mobile phone and found that it was an unfamiliar number. He hesitated for a moment, but still picked it up and said, "Tan Xiao speaking, who is this?" "I'm really sorry to disturb you so late at night, Mr. Tang. I'm Chen Zixue of the Sinyuan Group. Spit it out if you have something to say." Tan Xiao's tone was a bit bad. After all, the matter between husband and wife made him a bit tired. He had just fallen asleep and was woken up again, which made him feel very depressed. "I'm really sorry, Mr. Tang. I know it's wrong to disturb you so late at night, but I have no other choice," said Chen Zixue. "Can you meet me now?" "Now? Are you kidding me?" Tan Xiao looked at the time and found that it was 2:30 a.m. in the middle of the night, so he immediately spoke with a bad mood. "I'm afraid that I'll be kicked out of the game tomorrow," said Chen Zixue with a forced smile. "Tomorrow?" Tan Xiao recalled the bidding for the project. He immediately recalled the list of the top 10 construction companies in the country given to him by Kang Xia, and the Sinyuan Group was one of them. As for the general manager of the Sinyuan Group, the real helmsman was Chen Zixue. But did he want to open the back door for the project bidding this late at night? Tan Xiao thought for a few seconds and said, "Where are you now?" "Shanghai's Winger Road Grand Hotel." "I don't know where that is." "Come to Shanghai University within an hour if you want to see me. I'll be waiting for you at the university's gate." 40 minutes later. At the gate of Shanghai University. Tan Xiu was neatly dressed and sitting in a car, quietly reading the information he had just found on the internet. It was Chen Zixue's resume. The content was very short, but it had a lot of highlights. After reading it, he even had an illusion that Chen Zixue could be compared with him. His temperament had changed so much overnight that it was as if he had transmigrated back in time. "Boss, the HQ just sent a document." Mo Ao stood outside the car window and handed the tablet to Tan Xiu. After reading it seriously, Tan Xiu's expression turned extremely serious. He didn't expect that the everlasting feast hall would have Chen Zixue's information. The information was very detailed, and even some unknown things about Chen Zixue were clearly recorded. Pure young body. Gifted. The last comment of the document echoed in Tan Xiu's mind. The person who wrote it was Gu Xiaoxue. Tan Xiu hesitated for a moment before he dialed Gu Xiaoxue's number and asked, "Why do you have the information about Chen Zixue? Why didn't you recruit him to the everlasting feast hall?" "Grand Master, Master happened to meet Chen Zixue when he was a child, so he asked us to pay attention to his situation. Later on, Master stayed in the exquisite pagoda all year round, so I was responsible for sending people to investigate him. I found that there was something wrong with his temperament, so I just sent people to collect his information and didn't recruit him to the everlasting feast hall." Temperament? When Tan Xiu read the document, there was a comment from Gu Xiaoxue, "Unfathomable mind, wild and untamable in his bones, ruthless and merciless, and fond of unconventional methods." Tan Xiu hung up the phone and handed the tablet to Mo Ao, muttering, "He's a good talent, but it's a pity that he was born here." "Do you want to subdue him, boss?" asked Mo Ao with a moved expression. Tan Xiu was silent for a moment before he suddenly smiled and said, "I want to observe him more. Few men can pique my interest these days. If there's a surprise, maybe." Chapter 725. The harsh winter had passed, but the air was still chilly late at night. Under the dim street lights, a few sparrows occasionally fluttered and flew over, their bellies rumbling with hunger as they braved the cold to forage for food. The moment the cigarette burned out, a black Mercedes-Benz came quickly and stopped behind Tan Xiu's car. A stalwart man opened the door and Chen Zixue stepped out from the inside. He tightened his black trench coat and took a roll of paper to Tan Xiu's car. "Hello, Mr. Tang." Chen Zixue could see that Tan Xiu had no intention to get off, so he could only helplessly bow and greet him. Expressionless, Tan Xiu threw the cigarette butt out of the window. He looked at Chen Zixue's slightly changed expression and said indifferently, "Hurry up and tell me what you want to say. It's so cold outside. It's better to sleep under the quilt." Chen Zixue was silent for a moment. Then, he suddenly let out a smile and said, "I'm very sorry to disturb you so late at night, Mr. Tang. The main purpose is for the project bidding that your company is about to hold recently. Mr. Tang should have heard the saying that slow work produces fine work. Due to the short time given by your company, I personally led the design team to rush out the design drawings, and only 60% of them have been completed. Please take a look at the drawings." Tan Xiu casually glanced at him and immediately took the drawing from the window. His eyes suddenly focused after he opened it and looked at it for a few times. The drawing of this design drawing was excellent. According to the main design line given by Tan Xiu, it was very well subdivided. Whether it was the height of the floors, the distribution of the buildings, the architectural shape, and the use of space, everything was done very well. Even though Tan Xiu didn't know much about modern architectural design, he still felt that it was a bit amazing. Unfortunately, this was a semi-finished product. Tan Xiu looked at the dozens of design drawings that were previously rolled up in the drawing again. Then, he rolled it up again and handed it to Chen Zixue, saying, "It's too cold here. Let's talk somewhere else." A glint flashed in Chen Zixue's eyes and he turned back to the car without hesitation. The two cars drove for less than 10 minutes and then stopped in front of a 24-hour convenience store on the nearby commercial street. "Welcome." The young and beautiful female shop assistant raised her head and greeted them at the same time. This 24-hour convenience store had a total of 2 male and 1 female shop assistant. All 3 of them were very young. However, when the female clerk behind the counter saw Tan Xiu, she was slightly stunned and said in surprise, "Tan Xiu?" When Tan Xiu first entered the store, he did not pay attention to the female shop assistant. When he heard the other party call his name, Tan Xiu looked over. What he did not expect was that the female shop assistant was actually Yi Lianyan. "Why are you here?" Yi Lianyan was surprised to see Tan Xiu, but she was still a little embarrassed and said, "I'm short of money, so I came out to work to earn some living expenses." "But why did you come out in the middle of the night?" Tan Xiu said, "I'm just looking for a place with a friend to talk about something. I didn't expect to meet you here. If you're short of money, just tell me. You can ask for anything below 7 digits as long as you promise to work for me in the future." Yi Lianyan laughed involuntarily and said, "Does this count as paying my salary in advance?" "I guess so," replied Tan Xiu. Yi Lianyan slightly shook her head and said, "A gentleman doesn't eat food given out of pity. I'm just a little girl. You can pay me my salary when I officially work for you." Not far away, the 2 male shop assistants curled their lips in unison, revealing disdainful looks on their faces. 7 digits? What a rich man. Just say it directly if you want to keep Yi Lianyan as your mistress. What a hypocrite. Both of them directly labeled Tan Xiu in their hearts. Tan Xiu turned his head and looked at Chen Zixue, who was smiling without saying anything behind him. He casually pointed to a table by the window and said, "Yi Lianyan, give each of us an Odin and 2 bottles of drinks." "All right, wait for me." Yi Lianyan smiled and left. Tan Xiu and Chen Zixue came to the table by the window and took a seat. Then, Tan Xiu directly said, "Chen Zixue, I've seen your company's design. It's really good, but I don't get it. Why do you dare to come to Shanghai before the complete design is completed? You even dare to look for me in the middle of the night?" "Well, I must come for benefits," Chen Zixue said with a smile. "Benefits?" Tan Xiu disdainfully said, "Everyone wants to get benefits. But do you think you can get a share of the pie by looking for me now? It's very simple. Wanting to win such a big project in the tender held by the magnificent Tang Corporation without completing the design is absolutely a fool's dream," said Chen Zixue. "It's because I'm perfectly aware that no company will hand over the project to the other party without having completed the design. I'm gambling, and it turns out that my gamble is 40% correct." "How so?" asked Tan Xiu with interest. "The fact that you can leave your comfortable bed in the middle of the night proves that I've succeeded 20%. Chen Zixue said with a smile. "You've seen the semi-finished design and brought me here, which also proves that I've succeeded another 20%. Altogether, it's exactly 40%. You're very confident, and I appreciate your confidence." Tan Xiu nodded. "So, let's be more direct. You're only looking for me with the semi-finished design. What are you going to use to impress me?" Chen Zixue had played the script in his mind countless times, so he confidently said, "The magnificent Tang Corporation will build an industrial park in a HQ in Shanghai, but my Sinyuan Group will only earn 100 million yuan from the start to the end. Once we win this project and start the construction, your company can send someone to supervise the entire process of the project, including all the funds needed for the project, 100 million yuan? Tan Xiu frowned deeply. He didn't think that Chen Zixue's earnings were more than 100 million yuan, but it was too little. According to the result of the discussion between Tan Xiu and Kang Xia, the investment for the construction of the magnificent Tang Corporation's HQ and industrial park in Shanghai must be at least 10 billion yuan. Only earning 100 million yuan for a 10 billion yuan project was absolutely not something any construction company was willing to do. I don't think it's that simple, right? Tan Xiu subconsciously took out a cigarette. Chen Zixue quickly grabbed a lighter and personally lit it for Tan Xiu. "Boss Tang, you're really wise to have such achievements at such a young age," said Chen Zixue. The construction of the magnificent Tang Corporation's HQ in Shanghai as well as the entire industrial park is something I want to use as a prelude or a generous gift. As long as Boss Tang can promise me that all the construction projects of the magnificent Tang Corporation will be handed over to my Sinyuan Group. Tan Xiu's complexion slightly changed and a chilling light flashed in his eyes. He took out his mobile phone and immediately dialed a number in front of Chen Zixue, saying, "Investigate all the senior executives of the magnificent Tang Corporation. I want to know who leaked the latest branch construction plan of the magnificent Tang Corporation." Affirmative. The voice of the chief intelligence officer of the Everlasting Feast Hall came out of the phone. Chen Zixue maintained a calm smile all along and quietly waited for Tang Xiu to finish the call. Then, he touched his nose and smilingly said, "Boss Tang, I'm sure the investment won't be bigger than this project in Shanghai since your company has formulated such a development plan. Furthermore, you must implement this plan when the time comes and look for partners. To be honest, my Sinyuan Group has been engaged in the real estate business for more than 20 years. For us to be ranked among the top 10 in the domestic construction industry, we absolutely have an excellent engineering team and implementation ability. However, my company has now encountered a bottleneck. If we want to break this situation and make our development to the next level, we must find a shortcut and take an unconventional path. But your magnificent Tang Corporation can lead us out of this bottleneck. Then, I want to ask you something. Do you know how many branches and product sales stores my company is going to build?" asked Tan Xiu indifferently. "I don't know." Chen Zixue shook his head and said, "But I dare to bet that the number is definitely not small." Tan Xiu knocked on the table and squinted his eyes. "Are you not afraid that I'll give you the HQ and Industrial Park project of Shanghai's magnificent Tang Corporation, but I'll directly go back on my words once you've completed it?" "I'm betting on your character," said Chen Zixue solemnly. "Sometimes, character is simply not worth mentioning in the face of benefits," said Tan Xiu casually. "I'm betting on your character," said Chen Zixue again. "Also, I'll guarantee that my Sinyuan Group will never be greedy in the follow-up cooperation. We must earn what we should earn, but we won't ask for a penny more if we can't earn it. What I can guarantee is that compared to other construction companies, your magnificent Tang Corporation's branches and exclusive stores will absolutely spend a lot less money, and the quality and quantity of the project will be guaranteed." "So, your so-called benefit is the quantity?" asked Tan Xiu indifferently. "Yes." Chen Zixue firmly nodded. Tan Xiu nodded and didn't give any promise to Chen Zixue. Instead, he watched Liu Yanyan put 2 portions of Odin on the table and smilingly said, "This thing tastes good. I've eaten it here once. How about trying it?" Chen Zixue nodded. Although he was eating, he couldn't taste what it tasted like in his mouth. He silently calculated whether his chances of persuading Tan Xiu had increased, and if so, by how much. Tan Xiu quietly ate and occasionally glanced at Chen Zixue's face. He was secretly surprised and regretful after seeing the thoughtful expression on Chen Zixue's face. What surprised him was that Chen Zixue really had the ability. He was very satisfied with his conditions and had completely moved him. Regrettably, he found that Chen Zixue's ambition was too big during their exchange. Although he wasn't afraid of ambitious people, he didn't want to waste too many means on him. "Can I ask you a question?" Tan Xiu finished half a bowl of Odin and wiped his mouth with a napkin as he smilingly asked. Chapter 726. Chen Zixue swallowed the Odin in his mouth and picked up the water on the table to drink. Then, he said, "I'll tell you everything I know. Please ask." "A wolf and an eagle. If you have to choose, which one will you choose?" asked Tang Xiu. "I'll choose the eagle," answered Chen Zixue without hesitation. "Why?" asked Tan Xiu. "Wolves are wild, fierce, and tenacious, just like you did 8 years ago. Although the eagle can fly high in the sky, it doesn't have the personality of a wolf and can only rely on its innate talent to survive in the food chain." Chen Zixue calmly said, "The eagle soars high in the sky and overlooks all living beings. I'd rather be aloof than to be a wolf, even if it's a pack of wolves." Tan Xiu faintly sighed inwardly. If it were a wolf, he could still tame it. But it was not so easy to tame an eagle. He had to worry about having his eyes pecked out to catch an eagle. Although Tan Xiu had the ability to protect himself, he didn't want to waste too much time. Not to mention, Chen Zixue had too much wealth. In case he became a cultivator, he would be competitive in terms of resources in the future. After returning to Earth, Tan Xiu found that there were indeed a lot of precious herbs on Earth, but they were limited and he didn't want to look for trouble. What a pity. Tan Xiu took out his wallet and put 100 yuan on the table. He then stood up and said, "Let's meet at the bidding meeting." After saying that, after bidding farewell to Yi Lianyan, he directly left the 24-hour convenience store. He recognized Chen Zixue's deal and his ability, but he didn't recognize him as a person. Chen Zixue didn't get up. His mind was filled with all kinds of thoughts as he recalled the words Tan Xiu said before he left. Although he had realized that Tan Xiu would most likely choose the Sinyuan group to participate in the bidding meeting, but what did the last sentence, "what a pity," mean? He couldn't figure it out and felt a bit depressed. "Do you still want Odin, sir?" Yi Lianyan came to Chen Zixue with a smile and asked while cleaning up the disposable lunch boxes left by Tan Xiu. Chen Zixue slowly raised his head and looked at Yi Lianyan's beautiful appearance. His heart suddenly stirred and he asked, "You're called Yi Lianyan, right?" "I'm Chen Zixue, Sen Yuan." "Forget it, I'm a few years older than you. If you don't mind, just call me Big Brother Chen." Yi Lianyan smiled and said, "Hello, Brother Chen." Chen Zixue nodded and asked with a smile, "Can we sit down and talk?" Yi Lianyan complied and sat on the chair that Tan Xiu had originally sat on. She then asked with a smile, "Big Brother Chen should be a very capable person, right? I overheard your conversation just now. It seems like you're going to do business with Tan Xiu." Chen Zixue found it funny and said, "Does it mean that I'm very capable to do business with Tan Xiu?" Yi Lianyan smiled and said, "Of course. Tan Xiu is very capable. If you are not capable, why would he not sleep in the middle of the night and come here to discuss business with you? However, through your conversation just now, I realized that you should be begging him." Chen Zixue couldn't help laughing and said, "That's right. I'm begging him to give me a way to make money." Yi Lianyan giggled and said, "I believe that your dream will come true as long as you're sincere. Tan Xiu, he's very soft-hearted sometimes. You seem to know him very well." Chen Zixue was surprised. Yi Lianyan thought for a while and then shook her head. "I don't know him very well, but I can sense the luminous spots on his body. As a matter of fact, Big Brother Chen is also quite handsome, but you don't seem to be as charming as Tang Xiu." Back then, Yi Lianyan's words came to an abrupt halt. She seemed to realize that there were some things that she couldn't say and finally said with an awkward expression, "Back then, Tan Xiu was my savior." A smile outlined on the corner of Chen Zixue's mouth. His originally depressed mood turned a lot better. He was a calm and composed person and rarely talked nonsense with strangers. But at this moment, he had an impulse to chat more with Yi Lianyan, so he didn't hurry to leave and asked with a smile, "Tell me, what abilities does he have to be able to become the savior of a great beauty like you?" "Sorry, I can't tell you." Yi Lianyan let out a dry laugh. "Huh?" Chen Zixue looked straight at her. Yi Lianyan felt a bit scared under Chen Zixue's stare. She secretly regretted talking too much and hurriedly got up and said, "Big Brother Chen, I don't think you're a bad person, so I'll tell you something. Don't have any crooked thoughts about Tan Xiu, else you'll end up miserable." After saying that, she immediately returned to the cashier and no longer looked at Chen Zixue's direction. Chen Zixue slightly furrowed his brows. He retracted his gaze from Yi Lianyan and looked pensive. Yi Lianyan didn't want to say anything, so the matter behind it was definitely not simple. Although his curiosity was aroused, he suppressed it. Early morning the next day, Tan Xiu woke up from his sleep and found that the beauty beside him had disappeared. After he dressed and washed up, he came to the first floor and found some movements in the kitchen. "You got up so early?" Tan Xiu leaned on the door and asked with a smile while watching Kang Xia's back, who was wearing an apron and cooking. Kang Xia turned her head and smilingly said, "You got up early, huh? Why didn't you sleep more?" Tan Xiu smiled and said, "I have some serious business to do today, so I got up early to join in the fun. But today's bidding will still be presided over by you. I'll just be an observer." Kang Xia laughed and said, "You're such a leisurely big boss. Anyways, go to the dining room and wait for a while. Breakfast will be ready soon." Tan Xiu didn't leave and said, "Chen Zixue called me last night and we met last night." Kang Xia stared blankly and immediately turned around and asked, "Why did he look for you?" Tan Xiu said, "The Sinyuan Group's design has yet to be completed, but they negotiated a deal with me. This person is very amazing. He is the most amazing business genius I have ever seen. Let me tell you something. The latest development plan of our magnificent Tang Corp has been leaked out." "What?" Kang Xia's complexion greatly changed, and a faint trace of anger emerged in her eyes. "I've already sent some people to investigate this matter," said Tan Xiu. "All the senior executives of our magnificent Tang Corp will be investigated, and I'm sure we'll get the results soon. What I want to tell you is that although the Sinyuan Group's design is only half completed, I have seen it and it is very good. If there aren't any particularly outstanding designs or low prices in today's bidding, then choose the Sinyuan Group. This is not a trivial matter." Kang Xia frowned. "I understand what you mean." Tan Xiu nodded. However, Chen Zixue had told me exactly what he was thinking. He had an ulterior motive. Although the project in Shanghai is very large, he knows very well that it's too late for him to come up with a complete design. Hence, he didn't want to give up, so he put forward his other purpose. A few minutes later, Tan Xiu explained Chen Zixue's plan and finally said, "Since he gambled on me, then let him gamble. The company's skyscraper and industrial park will be handed over to the Sinyuan Group. Once the project is completed, we can ignore him if he's too greedy." Kang Xia quietly pondered for a while and then forced a smile. "You're thinking too simply. This Chen Zixue has seen that we're going to set up a branch company and a unique exclusive store in the second half of the year, so he made this request. Don't forget that the magnificent Tang Corp's HQ and industrial park project will be completed in half a year. Even a year is not enough time. According to our discussion, it will be completed by the end of next year." "I know. But the branch companies and exclusive stores in each province can't be built all at once, no?" Tan Xiu lightly smiled. "Then throw one or two provinces' projects to the Sinyuan Group. After that, we'll move on to the next province. If the Sinyuan Group dares to demand an exorbitant price and is too greedy, we can stop the cooperation in time." Kang Xia thought for a while and then smilingly said, "What you said makes sense. All right then. If there are no other surprises today, then let's set it to the Sinyuan Group." The breakfast was sumptuous and tasted great. After Tan Xiu and Kang Xia finished their breakfast and were about to go to the Paradise Club, an uninvited guest arrived and made Tan Xiu's plans for the day fall through. "Grandpa, why are you here?" Tan Xiu looked at the troubled Tang Guosheng and asked in surprise. Standing in front of Tang Guosheng, Kang Xia looked a bit uneasy. Tang Min, who was accompanying Tang Guosheng, was also a bit restless at the moment. She looked at Tan Xiu, wanting to say something but hesitating. Even though Kang Xia and Tan Xiu were living together, she didn't have the mood to say anything. "Xiu, let's go to your study room and talk." "All right." Tan Xiu led Tang Guosheng and Tang Min to the study room, while Kang Xia was responsible for serving tea. After the fragrant tea was served to Tang Guosheng and Tang Min, she was about to leave. "Sit there." Tan Xiu pointed to the chair inside the desk. Kang Xia stared blankly and hesitated for a moment before she obediently walked over. Tang Guosheng was a bit surprised. He looked at Kang Xia and then at Tan Xiu, and then slowly said, "Something big has happened. It's related to the life and death of hundreds of thousands of people, as well as the lives of a large number of overseas intelligence agents and military soldiers. It's also related to the survival and destruction of our Tang family's hidden forces. Tan Xiu was shaken inwardly. He simply couldn't believe his ears. It must be noted that this was an era of peace. How could such a serious matter happen? Grandpa, what's the matter? Tang Guosheng was a bit hesitant. He had been in the military for a lifetime and had seen countless people. Although he could see that the relationship between Kang Xia and Tan Xiu was unusual, he didn't know if he could trust Kang Xia. It was because what he was about to say was too important. It was important to the overall situation, and it was even more important to Tan Xiu. Tan Xiu had an outstanding mind. He noticed that Tang Guosheng was looking at Kang Xia again and immediately understood what he was thinking. Then, he resolutely said, "Grandpa, Kang Xia is my woman. She's also a close family member, and she's also a cultivator. Please speak freely if you have anything to say." Chapter 727. It was the first time for Tang Guosheng and Tang Min to hear Tan Xiu admit the fact that he had a woman. Even Mu Weining, who was well known to the outside world, was something Tan Xiu had never admitted. At this moment, the father and daughter exchanged glances and finally accepted Kang Xia completely. A cultivator. Kang Xia was also a cultivator, which meant that she was indeed Tan Xiu's most capable assistant. At this moment, the two of them realized that it was no wonder Tan Xiu could hand over the power of the magnificent Tang Corporation to Kang Xia. "Kang, you'll be the daughter-in-law of the Tang family from now on." Tang Guosheng turned to look at Kang Xia. After saying that, he directly turned his head and picked up the cigarette that Tan Xiu put down on the tea table. The daughter-in-law of the Tang family? At this moment, monstrous waves surged in Kang Xia's heart, and her delicate body couldn't help but tremble a few times. Great ecstasy accompanied by happiness made her feel unprecedentedly satisfied. She cared about Tan Xiu, and naturally, she also cared about the approval of the elders of the Tang family. Sometimes, she would have a little fantasy, but she didn't expect that her dream would come true. Feelings needed to be promoted by external factors, and it also needed the sincere care of the loved ones. What Tan Xiu just said made her feel satisfied, and it deepened her feelings for Tan Xiu. Tang Guosheng lit the cigarette and took 2 deep puffs before he slowly said, "This matter is very troublesome. It can be said that it's a big problem. If it's not handled well, not only the entire country will suffer a loss, even our Tang family will suffer a huge loss." "Grandpa, don't keep me guessing. Just tell me the specifics," said Tang Xiu. "Do you know about Mist Source Island?" asked Tang Guosheng. "I've never heard of it." Tan Xiu shook his head. "Is there such an island in our country? I used to think that it was a good thing for the country to conceal the existence of this island, but I didn't expect that such a situation would happen." Tang Guosheng sighed deeply. As a matter of fact, Mist Source Island is an island that suddenly appeared 20 to 30 years ago in the sea area outside of Treasure Island, only 800 nautical miles away. When this island appeared, the country immediately sent a large number of troops, geologists, and biologists to land there. Do you know what's going on with that island, which is about the same size as the Treasure Island? It's all made up of towering mountains and primeval forests. At first, there were many ferocious beasts and a large number of precious minerals. Even the medicinal herbs growing in it, according to the judgment of some highly respected old Chinese doctors, were thousands of years old. I've been there before. There's even a palace on top of a mountain in the center of the island. It's an ancient palace, but no one has been able to climb that mountain. No one has been able to take a look inside the palace. After the country's secret development, Mist Source Island has been completely controlled by our country. There are a lot of elite soldiers stationed there, and at the same time, the families of some soldiers and researchers who went there in the early days also live there. Now, the entire Mist Source Island has hundreds of thousands of residents. At this point, Tang Guosheng stopped and took another puff of his cigarette. Tan Xiu was shocked. How is it possible that the existence of Mist Source Island can be so secretive given the current situation? Don't you think the current media power is enough to expose the situation there? It's because the existence of Mist Source Island has been exposed that many countries have been coveting it, sighed Tang Guosheng. More than a decade ago, many countries have been trying to occupy it. But our country has stationed troops there, and it's also part of our country's sea area, so they have never succeeded. Treasure Island also tried to meddle, but it was suppressed and they could only choose to remain silent. If that's the case, then what exactly is the crisis? Asked Tan Xiu. Those foreign countries have always been coveting Mist Source Island. They even tried every means possible to send people to sneak into the island. But there were no major problems because the coastline was heavily guarded. Tang Guosheng suppressed his anger. But in recent years, some forces secretly supported by those foreign countries have been carrying out intense infiltration work. What's more, those foreign forces have really infiltrated the island, and the number is not small. Just 6 days ago, a resident of Mist Source Island suddenly fell into a coma. After the medical staff there examined him, they found that it was a virus. The infected patient had been in contact with a lot of people, so all of them were infected. Moreover, the degree of infection has been increasing, and the virus is spreading at an extremely terrifying speed. On the 4th day, 80% of the people in the entire Mist Source Island have been infected. Up until today, even the garrison there has been infected. Hundreds of thousands of people. Although the country's top virus experts were sent there a few days ago, they were helpless. Just yesterday, the old divine Dr. Gui Jianqiu, who is stationed in the imperial capital, also rushed there. How did this virus come about? Asked Tan Xiu with a frown. Someone from the world's most dangerous organization, the Stygian Club, sneaked into the island and injected the virus into the first infected person, said Tang Guosheng in a deep voice. The foreign black market is selling antivirus strengthening drugs. Those who have been injected with the drug in advance will not be infected by the virus again. Therefore, thousands of people from the Stygian Club and other forces have landed on Mist Source Island in the past 7 days. The garrison has had several fierce battles with them, and both sides eventually suffered losses. Some of them are very powerful. Tan Xiu slammed his fist on the table and angrily said, "It's this damn Stygian Club again. It seems that its existence is indeed a scourge." "You know about the Stygian Club?" asked Tang Guosheng with a serious expression. A cold light flashed in Tan Xiu's eyes as he nodded and said, "I've dealt with the Stygian Club's people several times, and they suffered losses every time." "Grandpa, do you mean you want me to go to Mist Source Island?" "I do have such a plan, but it's very dangerous there now." Tang Guosheng nodded and said, "On one hand, there's the threat of the virus, and on the other hand, there are various foreign forces eyeing covetously. I'm also worried." Tan Xiu interrupted Tang Guosheng and solemnly said, "Don't worry. It's just a virus. It won't harm me. As for those foreign forces, unless they use nuclear bombs, they won't be able to threaten me much." Tang Guosheng nodded without a word and bitterly said, "There are people from our Tang family on Mist Source Island. I instructed your second grandpa to secretly set up a martial arts training camp on the island. After you get there, you can contact the people from the state first, and then secretly go to Tengzhuang Martial School to find Tang Han." "Who's Tang Han?" asked Tan Xiu. "She's your uncle's eldest daughter," answered Tang Guosheng. Tan Xiu was shocked and asked in surprise, "My uncle has an eldest daughter? How come I didn't know about it?" Tang Guosheng forced a smile and said, "In the past, in order to be stationed on Mist Source Island secretly, I announced to the public that your uncle's eldest daughter died at the age of 4 and was secretly sent to Mist Source Island. After training her since childhood, she successfully took over the affairs of Tengzhuang Martial School at the age of 18. It's been 11 years now. That child can only quietly return to the imperial capital once every 2 years. She's 29 years old now, but the number of times she came back is only 12. Our Tang family owes her too much." Tan Xiu felt deep veneration for this cousin he had never met. He nodded and said, "I got it, Grandpa." Tang Min took out 2 things from her bag. One was a small green book with only 2 words written on it, "Security." The other was a black badge with only a blood drop pattern on it. This green book is the certificate of the State Security Department, Xiao. I've already done it for you. This badge is the symbol of our Tang family's secret forces. Take it to see your sister and she'll naturally believe you, said Tang Min in a low voice. Tan Xiao nodded. After hesitating for a moment, he asked, Grandpa, who else wants me to go to Mist Source Island besides you? Tang Guosheng and Tang Min exchanged glances. Then, Tang Guosheng forced a smile and said, Sure enough, I can't hide it from you. It's the one on top. Which one? The one with the highest position. Tan Xiao squinted his eyes and asked, Are there any benefits? Just one sentence, let bygones be bygones and be loyal to the country, said Tang Guosheng. Tan Xiao was shaken inwardly. He subconsciously grabbed a cigarette and lit it up. After taking a few deep puffs, he grinned and said, This old man is compromising and also handing me an imperial sword. If my guess is correct, he won't take back this green book later, right? Indeed. Tang Guosheng knew that his grandson was smart and immediately nodded with a smile. Tan Xiao got up and said, If that's the case, then I'll take this job. When will you leave? The sooner the better, said Tang Guosheng. The military base in Shanghai has prepared a military helicopter and can take off at any time. Tan Xiao looked at Kang Xia and said, I can't accompany you for today's matter. Also, don't disclose my whereabouts to anyone. Kang Xia got up with a deep worry. She nodded and exhorted, Safety first. I got it. Tan Xiao replied. Tang Guosheng didn't hurry to leave, and neither did Tang Min. They looked at Tan Xiao's back as he quickly left the house and sighed at the same time. Shanghai Garrison Base. Hu Zhenfeng, dressed in military uniform, had been waiting for a long time. He was the Chief of Staff of the General Staff Department of the Mist Source Island Garrison with the rank of Senior Colonel. Originally, he was going to take a vacation and return to the imperial capital, but a major event happened in Mist Source Island. He received an order to escort Tang Guosheng to Shanghai and to stand by at the Shanghai Garrison Base. Stand by and wait for someone. He didn't know who he was waiting for, nor could he figure out the identity of the person who made him, a chief of staff of a senior colonel, wait. Four black SUVs came from a distance and parked near the helipad of the military helicopter. As a big man in a black suit opened the door, Hu Zhenfeng's eyes fell on the rear door of the third car. He knew that the person who could directly drive the car from the outside and come here was definitely a big shot. Chapter 728. Tan Xiao did not intend to bring a lot of people to Mist Source Island this time. In addition to Mo, who usually followed him, there were only 10 other bodyguards. Although there were many unknown enemies, he was confident that he could kill them all. However, on the way to the garrison base, he made a few phone calls. In addition to asking for leave from his homeroom teacher, Han Qinggu, he also informed Shuiyu. In addition, Li Laozhan had been busy recently and said that he would find time to have a meal together. Originally, he wanted to treat Li Laozhan to a meal, but he was in a hurry to leave Shanghai, so he had to call him in advance. As soon as Tan Xiao got out of the car, he saw Hu Zhenfeng, who was tall and straight in a military uniform. After walking straight to him, Hu Zhenfeng directly took out a green book and said, I'm Tan Xiao. We need to go to Mist Source Island immediately. This is the certificate. Hu Zhenfeng took the green book and glanced at it a few times. He then nodded and said, I've received orders from the higher-ups. This military helicopter will take us to Nansha province, and then we must take a ship to Mist Source Island. If the journey goes smoothly, we can arrive before evening. Tan Xiao frowned and asked, Can't we fly there directly? Hu Zhenfeng shook his head and said, According to the provisions of the military aircraft agreement, no flights are allowed to travel to and from Mist Source Island. The Air Defense Department has set up an intercontinental armed system on Mist Source Island. Once you approach within 50 kilometers of Mist Source Island, you will be regarded as an enemy and will immediately open fire. Tan Xiao asked, Not even a military helicopter? Don't tell me there aren't even fighter jets there. No. Is it because it's not suitable? Hu Zhenfeng shook his head. Why do you say that? Asked Tan Xiu. Hu Zhenfeng forced a smile and said, there's a strange magnetic field shrouding a dozen kilometers around Mist Source Island. Any unit instrument would malfunction once it entered there. In addition, Mist Source Island is surrounded by a deep layer of fog. Since the island was discovered, the fog only dissipates for 2 hours a day, and only during those 2 hours can one enter and exit Mist Source Island. Array formation. Tan Xiu pondered for a few seconds before he nodded and said, forget it. Let's go now. Can this helicopter fit so many of us? Hu Zhenfeng said, excluding the 2 pilots in the cockpit, the cabin can only accommodate 10 people. Since I don't know how many of you are coming, I only asked the military to prepare this helicopter. But I can apply for another helicopter now. Sorry for the trouble. Tan Xiu nodded. 2 minutes later, 2 military SUVs roared over and quickly stopped nearby. As 7 fully armed soldiers in camouflage uniforms got off the vehicles, a lean man at the front put the camouflage bag in his hand on the ground and saluted Hu Zhenfeng. Yu Shuqing, captain of the Phantom Special Combat Squad, reporting to the chief. After Hu Zhenfeng returned the greeting, he said with a smile, after receiving the order from the higher-ups, I knew that I would see you, my old friend. Your Phantom Special Combat Squad has made great contributions to the country all these years. The old chief has praised you a lot in front of me. Yu Shuqing smiled and said, serving the country is our duty. Hu Zhenfeng nodded and glanced at the other 6 members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad. He nodded with satisfaction and said, I'm completely relieved to have your Special Combat Squad following me to Mist Source Island. Shuqing, let me introduce you. This is Tan Xiu, the person in charge of the Mist Source Island incident. All the members of your Phantom Special Combat Squad are responsible for accepting his command. Yu Shuqing furrowed his brows, but he still saluted Tan Xiu. Yu Shuqing, captain of the Phantom Special Combat Squad, reporting to the chief. Behind him, the other 6 members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad had their complexions slightly changed and a bit of anger could be seen in their eyes. After coming here, they found that Mo and the others around Tan Xiu had extraordinary temperaments and a faint smell of blood, which was a big threat even for them. However, Tan Xiu was too young and they had always acted alone. Now that they were suddenly assigned to work under an unfamiliar young man, they were very dissatisfied. I don't need other helpers, actually. Tan Xiu nodded indifferently and said, but since you've accepted the order, it's not good for me to refuse. After we arrive at Mist Source Island, I'll explain to the chief military officer there to let you stay at the base. A cold light flashed in Yu Shuqing's eyes as he indifferently said, you're crazy. Tan Xiu shook his head and no longer paid attention to him. He greeted Hu Zhenfeng and then boarded the military helicopter with Mo, Jin Shi, and the others, leaving only the 2 experts of the Everlasting Feast Hall behind. Boss, I've dealt with this Phantom Special Combat Squad before, said Shui Sha in a low voice after taking a seat in the cabin next to Tan Xiu. When? Asked Tan Xiu with furrowed brows. When I found Mouse before, one of the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad was following us and I intercepted him halfway, said Shui Sha. He didn't see my face, so he didn't know that I've dealt with them. Tan Xiu suddenly understood. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth as he said, it seems that they're the ones who fought with the SOE company in Shanghai. If not for our special identities, I'm afraid this Phantom Special Combat Squad is already very powerful for ordinary people. I can wipe out their entire squad if I act, sneered Shui Sha. Don't talk nonsense. Tan Xiu snappily scolded with a smile, they're just ordinary people. Who do you think you are? Do you have the nerve to compare yourself with them? Ugh, Shui Sha let out a hollow laugh and lowered his head, no longer speaking. Below the military helicopter, Mo Xiaonan, one of the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad, glanced at the 2 big men, Shui Gui and Yishir San, and immediately asked, what are they doing, Chief? Don't ask what you shouldn't ask. I don't know. Hu Zhenfeng shook his head. Mo Xiaonan said, you don't know? Mo Xiaonan said, then you want us to listen to the orders of that Tang brat? Isn't this some kind of international joke? That's an order, said Hu Zhenfeng in a deep voice. Yi Shisan shot a cold look at Mo Xiaonan and coldly said, if you dare to insult our boss again, I'll kill you on the spot even if you're from the military. Boss? I thought it was some big shot, but it turns out to be a boss, sneered Mo Xiaonan. What are the higher-ups thinking? People who want us to listen to their orders. Also, there are bodyguards who like to talk nonsense. What a joke. A displeased look also appeared on Yu Shuqing's face, but he thought about it more. He felt that it was impossible for a pure businessman to have the qualifications to come here and even have the right to order them. He glared at Mo Xiaonan and said in a deep voice, shut up. Mo Xiaonan coldly snorted and provocatively looked at Yi Shisan and Shui Gui, no longer speaking. 20 minutes later. Another military helicopter was ready and soon disappeared into the clouds as Hu Zhenfeng and the others boarded. 2 hours later, 2 military helicopters arrived at the Nanxia Province Garrison Base. Furthermore, the Nanxia Province Garrison Base also sent 6 military jeeps to send everyone to the military port. The Freedom Liner. After boarding the medium-sized liner, Hu Zhenfeng exchanged some words with the people on the liner and then directly set sail to Mist Source Island. From Nanxia Province to Mist Source Island, they needed to bypass the Bao Island, so it took a lot of time to sail. It wasn't until the evening that the liner entered a misty sea area. Interesting. Standing on the bow deck, Tan Xiu looked around with his hands behind his back. He could clearly feel a special energy drifting around him, which should be the energy carried by the mist. However, this energy drifting had a positive and stable pattern, which was not formed naturally but caused by an array. Tan Xiu, pay attention to your safety later. This sea is not peaceful. Hu Zhenfeng came out of the cabin with a faint smile and stood side by side with Tan Xiu. Tan Xiu turned his head and asked, tell me, how is it not peaceful? There are fierce beasts in this sea, said Hu Zhenfeng. Do you know what fierce beasts are? They are the kind of wild beasts with simple intelligence, but their attack power is many times stronger than wild beasts. Especially in this misty area, there are black sharks living there. Fortunately, our ship is made of iron. If a wooden ship passed here, those black sharks would have bitten through the wooden ship. Tan Xiu asked, has no one ever hunted these black sharks? How could they not be hunted? Hu Zhenfeng said, but there are a lot of these black sharks and they are social creatures. Every time they appear, they will form groups of at least hundreds of them. Our garrison has sent troops to clean them up many times, but we always feel that we can't kill them all and destroy them all. Tan Xiu nodded and lightly said, after we solve the crisis on Mist Source Island, I'll send some people to help clean it up. After this battle, I'm afraid that the news of the existence of Mist Source Island can no longer be blocked. We really need to solve this crisis before ordinary people come here. Hu Zhenfeng's mouth twitched twice as he glanced at Tan Xiu with a trace of contempt. He had seen a lot of capable people and also met a lot of people who could brag, but none of them could be as arrogant as Tan Xiu. Even the army couldn't clean up those black sharks, yet this Tan Xiu had never seen one, yet he dared to talk nonsense here. He really couldn't understand why the higher-ups would send such a guy to solve the crisis on Mist Source Island. The liner moved forward. Soon, the liner passed through the misty area and the island looming in the distance could be seen in a wide field of vision. When the liner docked on the island, Hu Zhenfeng personally brought a batch of masks. I don't need them. Tan Xiu shook his head lightly. Don't mess around, Tan Xiu. Hu Zhenfeng angrily said. The virus on Mist Source Island is very serious. If the ship wasn't equipped with gas masks, I would have made everyone wear them. Quickly take them and put them on. We're going to disembark. Tan Xiu didn't take them. He walked to the edge of the deck and instantly sprinted forward. The distance of 6 or 7 meters was crossed by him in a single step and his feet directly landed on the shore road. Mo and the others also followed him and jumped to the shore one by one. Chapter 729. On the liner's deck, Hu Zhenfeng's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets when he saw Tan Xiu and his men easily jump 6 or 7 meters away. The world-long jump record was 8.95 meters, but that was due to the inertia of sprinting at full speed. Although the deck was only 6 or 7 meters away from the shore, the seemingly easy jump without any run-up was simply beyond Hu Zhenfeng's imagination. They're really monsters. They can jump so far with just a lift of their legs. If they were to participate in the Olympic long jump, they would definitely break the world record. Hu Zhenfeng's contempt for Tan Xiu was reduced a lot. The members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad, including Captain Yu Shuqing, were also surprised by the long jump ability of Tan Xiu and his men. Although they could also jump ashore, it was definitely not as easy as Tan Xiu and his men. "Captain, it seems that these guys are experts." Chen Yongfan, who had always been proud of his speed, approached Yu Shuqing and spoke with a solemn expression. "I've long noticed that they are experts, but I didn't expect them to be more powerful than I expected." Yu Shuqing nodded. "I'm afraid you're the only member of our Phantom Special Combat Squad who can barely do this." Chen Yongfan forced a smile and said, "They need a few run-up steps, else it'll be a bit difficult. Since they can be appointed by the higher-ups to solve the crisis here, I don't think they are bad," said Yu Shuqing. "All of you, stay alert and don't have any unpleasant encounters with them." "All right." Several people nodded. On the shore, a medium-sized bus that could accommodate more than 20 people was parked. There was only a young man in leather clothes and a mask standing at the door. When he saw Hu Zhenfeng, his eyes suddenly lit up. He strode forward and saluted, "Chief of Staff, you're finally back. Our garrison is in big trouble." "What's the situation now?" asked Hu Zhenfeng. "How many people in the army have been infected by the virus?" The young man said bitterly, "A total of 88 people from the 2 ships patrolling the nearby waters are not infected. The rest are all suffering from a fever and symptoms of weakness. We've taken various antiviral drugs, but none of them have any effect. The preventive drugs we bought from the foreign black market came too late. Apart from those 2 ships, do the other officers and soldiers still have combat ability?" asked Hu Zhenfeng hurriedly. The young man nodded and said, "It's fine for a short time, but it can only last for 3 to 5 days at most. Chief of Staff, the first person infected with the virus died 6 hours ago. There are still dozens of people on the island who are seriously ill and could die at any time." Hu Zhenfeng's expression slightly changed as he asked in a deep voice, "How many people on the island are uninfected?" An angry look flashed across the young man's face as he said, "There are more than 1,000 people, and more than 90% of them are from some foreign forces. They took preventive medicine before coming, so they weren't infected. Division Commander Yang didn't want us to have any conflict with them. That's why those people were so arrogant on the island, but they didn't do anything out of line. They are scattered all over the island, surveying the island's mineral resources and gathering all kinds of information about the island." A chilling light flashed in Hu Zhenfeng's eyes as he asked, "Did you bring the gas mask?" The young man nodded and said, "Yes, 30 in total." Hu Zhenfeng turned to look at Tan Xiu, Yu Shuqing, and the others and said in a deep voice, "We didn't take any preventive medicine before, so we must wear gas masks to avoid getting infected. Chief of Staff, we bought 100 preventive medicines from those foreign forces. We don't need to worry about getting infected after taking them. We just need to wear a mask." After saying that, he poured out a lot of black pills from the small bottle he carried and handed them to Hu Zhenfeng. Hu Zhenfeng's eyes lit up as he grabbed one and immediately stuffed it into his mouth. He then handed it to Yu Shuqing and the others and watched them take it. However, when he gave it to Tan Xiu refused it. "We don't need it." Tan Xiu didn't want to take this unknown medicine because he firmly believed that the infectious virus posed no threat to cultivators like them. "Tan Xiu, you may be the person in charge of solving this crisis, but you can't be arrogant and conceited," said Hu Zhenfeng angrily. "Since this preventive medicine is effective, you must take it for the sake of safety." "You're not my superior, so I don't need to obey your orders," said Tan Xiu indifferently. "All right, Time is of the essence. Let's hurry up. A burst of rage surged out from the bottom of Hu Zhenfeng's heart, but he forcefully suppressed it. He couldn't figure out the origin of Tan Xiu and the others. He even felt that Tan Xiu and the others were not from the security bureau. On the road, Tan Xiu learned about divine Dr. Gue Jianqiu's situation from the young man who drove the car. He learned that Gue Jianqiu had also taken the preventive medicine and was now studying the virus on the island. However, he just arrived yesterday and hadn't found any results yet. After driving for more than 2 hours, the bus entered a rugged mountain road. After more than half an hour of bumpy journey, it finally drove into an olive-green military camp. Yang Chuxiong was the commander of the garrison. Although he was only a division commander, he had the rank of Major General. He was not old, only 46 years old. He had a stocky build and looked like a fierce tiger general. Welcome, Tan Xiu. The moment Yang Chuxiong saw Tan Xiu, he looked slightly surprised. Although he had received the order from his superior and learned that Tan Xiu had come to help solve the crisis, he didn't expect that Tan Xiu was really as young as the rumors said. Hu Zhenfeng might not know about Tan Xiu's past achievements, but Yang Chuxiong had investigated him through his authority and found that Tan Xiu was not simple at all. You're Division Commander Yang, right? Tan Xiu slightly nodded. I've learned about the situation on the way here. It's terrible, isn't it? It's more than terrible. It's simply terrible, said Yang Chuxiong bitterly. If we can't solve the virus in the next 2 or 3 days, I'm afraid more than half of the hundreds of thousands of people on the island will die. 2 or 3 days. What about divine Dr. Gue Jianqiu? Tan Xiu asked bluntly. Take me to see him. He's in the temporary laboratory inside, said Yang Chuxiong immediately. We've collected the blood samples of the infected people. Divine Dr. Gue Jianqiu is going all out to study the nature of the virus and find a way to concoct an antidote. 10 minutes later, Tan Xiu saw the legendary divine Dr. Gue Jianqiu. He was wearing a white coat and a pair of white gloves. He was in a temporary laboratory, using a pair of tweezers to pick up a small piece of rotten flesh and observe it. Hello, I'm Tan Xiu. Tan Xiu stepped forward and introduced himself. Gue Jianqiu was a very thin man with a solemn expression on his wrinkled face. After hearing Tan Xiu's words, he slightly furrowed his brows and carefully observed Tan Xiu a few times. Then, he slowly nodded and said, You're the young divine Dr. Tan Xiu of Star City Chinese Medical Hospital. You're a medical grandmaster that makes my 2 proud and arrogant disciples feel ashamed of their inferiority. I've paid attention to some of the cases you've treated, especially your acupuncture technique. It's simply magical and amazing. You're overpraising me, Senior Gue Jianqiu, said Tan Xiu politely. Senior Gue Jianqiu, since you came earlier than me, can you tell me the results of your research? Also, what about the virus? I've been studying medicine all my life, and I've encountered countless kinds of diseases. But this virus is very strange. It has a wide range of transmission routes. It's transmitted through saliva, blood, air, water. Any healthy ordinary person has the possibility of being infected as long as they are within 10 meters of the infected person. Of course, I've also studied Western medicine and have some achievements in it. But it's very difficult to extract a virus sample no matter what method is used to extract it. Also, I've tried hundreds of methods and used a large number of medicinal herbs to conduct research, but none of them can kill this virus. Its activity is too strong. Tan Xiu was silent for a moment. He then flipped his hand and took out a porcelain bottle. He handed it to Gue Jianqiu and said, This is a kind of medicine I've refined. It has a very good effect in tempering the human body. Put this medicine into it and see if it has any effect. Gue Jianqiu looked surprised, but he still took the porcelain bottle. He carefully poured a drop from the inside and dripped it on the rotten flesh. Buzz, 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 it was as though a strong sulfuric acid was poured on the rotten flesh. The rotten flesh rotted at a very fast speed and eventually turned into a puddle of pungent black liquid. Gue Jianqiu frowned and forced a smile. Not only is it ineffective, but it will also cause the infected person to die. Tan Xiu squinted his eyes. He grabbed a pen and paper on the table and quickly wrote down a series of medicinal herbs names: honeysuckle, wild lily, poison string, black scorpion, golden cicada shell. All, come in. Tan Xiu shouted in a deep voice. Mo pushed the door and came in, asking, "What's your order, boss?" Tan Xiu handed him the list and seriously said, "Go find these medicinal herbs immediately and send them here as fast as possible. Ask Division Commander Yang to help. He's more familiar with this place than you." Understood. Mo took the list and left. Gui Jianchou's eyes retracted from Mo's back and asked with a confused expression, "Tang. I'll call you Little Tang. What's the prescription you gave me?" "The body-refining medicine I concocted has the opposite effect of the medicinal herbs I just gave you," said Tan Xiu. "I want to try the opposite effect to see if it will be effective against this virus." Gui Jianchou pondered for a while before he nodded and said, "It's quite possible. I also used medicinal herbs to decoct the medicine before, but it didn't have any effect on the rotten flesh after being poured on it. When things reach an extreme, they will go in the opposite direction. Maybe the prescription you just gave will have an effect." Tan Xiu forced a smile and said, "I'm just trying to find a doctor in a desperate situation. I don't want to let go of any possibility. To tell you the truth, my medical skills are somewhat special, but there's one thing I'm sure of. It's absolutely incomparable to yours. You haven't studied the nature of the virus and haven't researched the medicine to treat the infected, so I'm afraid I'm even worse." Chapter 730. Don't belittle yourself, Little Tang. Gui Jianchou shook his head and said, "Perhaps it's because of your special medical skills that you were able to take an unconventional approach and finally find a solution." "That's right, I just had a new idea. Let's study it before we find the herbs you need. What do you think?" Gui Jianchou spoke his idea and the two immediately began experimenting. After failing, the two continued to discuss and experiment. Proposals emerged one after another, but the experiments failed again and again. Time passed. As a cultivator, Tang Xiu was able to withstand the prolonged research, but Gui Jianchou, on the other hand, was already quite old. Although he had been paying attention to recuperation all these years, he still had no choice but to stop the research due to exhaustion and ran to the next room to sleep for a few hours. The next afternoon, the death data of the infected people on Mist Source Island had been recalculated. The number of infected people who died from the virus had increased to 562. Just as the data was sent to Tan Xiu, Mo hurriedly returned with the herbs Tan Xiu needed. "All the herbs are here, boss." Mo placed 2 suitcases in front of Tan Xiu and wiped the sweat on his forehead. Tan Xiu nodded and immediately began to refine the medicine. After several hours of refining, a pitch-black pill was successfully refined. Under the watchful eyes of divine Dr. Gui Jianchou, he ground the pill and sprinkled it on the rotten flesh. This time, the rotten flesh didn't immediately corrode and fester, but it didn't have much effect on the virus. "Lil Tang, did you notice that after I sprinkled the medicinal powder you refined, black lines appeared on the rotten flesh? I used a magnifying glass to observe it. Those black lines are composed of countless extremely fine active particles, as though they are alive. In Western medicine, they can be called bacteria," said Gui Jianchou slowly. Tan Xiu pondered for a moment. Suddenly, a ray of light flashed in his mind and he hurriedly said, "If they're bacteria, then they're viruses and bacteria. There are many ways to sterilize them. We can consider the electric current sterilization method." "Electric current sterilization method?" Gui Jianchou stared blankly for a moment. He suddenly thought of something and immediately said, 42 years ago, the eccentric doctor in the northeast, Gao Yitong, invented the electric current sterilization method. It uses static electricity to encircle and suppress viruses and bacteria. Although this method was rarely used in reality, it was still popular in some mountainous areas in the northeast. "I think we can give it a try." "Give it a try." Tan Xiu did as he thought of it. To his pleasant surprise, after he used the electric current to sterilize the rotten meat, the black lines in the rotten meat continued to burn, turning into a pungent black smoke. However, the rotten meat gradually became brighter. Through the research of Gui Jianqiu and Tan Xiu, they discovered that the virus and bacteria were actually suppressed. It's effective, but the speed at which the viruses and bacteria divide and grow is too fast. Although the electric current sterilization can kill a large number of viruses and bacteria, it's very difficult to eradicate them. If the human body is constantly electrified, it can temporarily remove the worry of death and temporarily suppress it, Gui Jianqiu said excitedly. Let's find a live experiment. In addition, we need to generate static electricity into the human body, but it will not harm human health. Strive to let every infected person use it. Tan Xiu nodded heavily. All right. There were 4 common ways to generate static electricity, namely, charge migration, braking electrification, induction electrification, and contact separation. Among them, the most suitable method to be used in a large number of people was contact separation, such as chemical fiber underwear, carpets, cushions, wallpaper, and other items. After contact and separation, static electricity would be generated. In addition, when household appliances are in use, they will also produce static electricity, or the outer shell will carry static electricity, such as the television screen or computer screen. After temporarily studying this plan, Tan Xiu did not hesitate to reflect the situation to Yang Chuxiong, and then through the TV broadcast, radio promotion, mobile phone information dissemination, and military soldiers running around to spread the news. On the 3rd night after Tan Xiu landed on Mist Source Island, the virus crisis was finally temporarily solved, and countless people who were on the verge of death finally hung on the line of death. In the terrain of Mist Source Island, there were only 4 areas suitable for living, which were continuously opened up by the people who lived here for decades. Between the mountains, there were some villages, but according to official statistics, there were only 24. Every village had a population of at most a few thousand, and at least a few hundred. Python City, Wolf City, Double Brook City, and Mixed Summit City. The population of these 4 major urban areas, the largest Python City had 1 to 200,000 people, while the smallest Mixed Summit City had only 70 to 80,000 people. After decades of development, now all 4 cities had been opened up, and there were even a number of main roads and dozens of small roads and mountain roads connected together. Mixed Summit City. Rows of collective village buildings were moving in a neat and orderly manner. The bustling commercial streets were almost no different from the outside world cities. Although this place was very secretive, with the secret support of the country, there was still a steady flow of materials from the outside world. People living here, in addition to relying on the government to eat, can also collect medicinal materials, find minerals, and other resources, and even have many private factories. On a street in the north of the city, dozens of burly men in suits surrounded the 5 buildings, not even a drop of water could trickle through. From time to time, many people came from all over and hurriedly entered the 5 buildings. In the middle building, Keith Moore, a high-ranking member of the Stygian Club, was smoking the world's top Cuban cigar and tasting delicious coffee while quietly listening to the report of his trusted subordinate. We've investigated that the person who invented the electrostatic therapy is called Tan Xiu. According to the investigation, he's the behind-the-scenes boss of China's magnificent Tang Corporation. He's also a Chinese medicine practitioner known as the Young Divine Doctor. We haven't investigated how he came to Mist Source Island. Further, the electrostatic sterilization method can only temporarily suppress the virus, but it can't completely cure it. He's also a great help to us, said the thin middle-aged man. Keith Moore's eyes flickered as he nodded and said, "You're right. We didn't bring the virus to destroy all the humans on this island. We just wanted to destroy some of them, and then control the fate of most of them in their fear, so that we can order them around in the future. However, there's a problem with the environment here, which caused the virus outbreak to multiply and eventually made us lose control. The appearance of Tan Xiu is a relief to us." "What should we do now, sir?" asked the thin middle-aged man. Keith Moore stroked his chin and coldly said, "Send an assassin to capture that Tan Xiu. Since he can come up with the electrostatic sterilization method, it shows that he's a great talent. Maybe we can use him in the future. Also, don't relax in surveying the mountain range around Mixed Summit City. We've only surveyed a small lithium mine. The more mineral deposits we survey, the bigger our harvest will be when we negotiate with the Chinese authorities in the future." "Understood. I'll arrange it immediately. But what should we do in case that Tan Xiu resists?" asked the thin middle-aged man. "We can't kill him even if he resists," said Keith Moore in a deep voice. "Since he can find a way to suppress the darkening virus in such a short time, I'm sure he can develop a new antidote. We'll need the antidote when we negotiate with the Chinese authorities in the future." "I understand," the thin middle-aged man replied and turned to leave. Keith Moore watched as the thin middle-aged man left. Then, he clapped his hands and two pale young men in black windbreakers appeared in front of him. "You two, take the Spectre team and quietly follow him. That Tan Xiu's identity isn't simple. I believe the Chinese military will protect him. If the assassination fails, you two will take over the arrest." "Understood." The two young men agreed, and their figures instantly disappeared from the spot. In a valley dozens of kilometers south of Twin Brook City, lush trees, fresh flowers, and wild animals could be seen everywhere. It was a scene full of vitality. Compared to the lifeless atmosphere in Twin Brook City, there were dozens of military tents set up here. A dark-skinned foreign old man in a black tuxedo stood on a slope south of the tents, leaning on a golden crutch. Behind him were two men and two women in black leather clothes, shrouded in a chilling aura. It was completely out of place with the lively scene in the valley. Even some wild animals avoided them from afar. "Shu, how's the preparation of the virus gene conversion catalyst?" asked the foreign old man all of a sudden. Behind him, the man on the far left replied with a hoarse voice, "It's only the last step. It's estimated to be ready in 3 days." The foreign old man nodded with satisfaction and said, "That Tan Xiu of China who suddenly came to Mist Source Island does have some skills. He's much better than those idiots under Keith Moore. Our pyramid organization has come here and ruined the Stygian Club's plan, so we must be prepared to tear all pretense of cordiality with them. Send some people to make trouble for them. They want to explore the mineral deposits, so we must not let them have their way. Get it done at once," said Shu respectfully. The foreign old man touched his chin and said, "Immediately take some men to kill that Tan Xiu after giving the order. It's a relief that he found a way to temporarily suppress the darkening virus. But we must never let him find the real cure for the darkening virus, nor let the Stygian Club capture him." "I can go alone, sir," said Shu with a hideous grin. The foreign old man snorted coldly and said, "There's an old saying in China that it's better to be safe than sorry. I know you have the strength, but don't lose your life because of your arrogance." Chapter 731. At the military encampment on Mist Source Island, Tan Xiu and Gui Jianqiu finally heaved a sigh of relief after finding a way to suppress the darkening virus. Yang Chuxiong, the highest-ranking officer on Mist Source Island, excitedly held a celebration banquet after being infected for several days and having the darkening virus suppressed. Night fell. With the end of the celebration banquet, Tan Xiu decided to go out for a stroll and see his cousin, Tang Han. When he told Yang Chuxiong about his intention to leave the military encampment, Yang Chuxiong strongly dissuaded him. "Divine Dr. Tang, the situation on Mist Source Island is very chaotic now. Not to mention the panic caused by the darkening virus, which has led to many pessimists causing trouble. Just the foreign forces are all arrogant and despotic, with malicious intentions. I'm afraid you'll be in trouble if you run into them. I received the order to solve the problem on Mist Source Island, not just to study the infectious disease." Tan Xiu shook his head. "Division Commander Yang, if I stay here because I'm afraid of danger, what's the point of the one at the top to send me here?" "The one at the top?" Yang Chuxiong stared blankly for a moment. His pupils suddenly shrunk and a horrified look appeared in his eyes. Although he received an order to assist Tan Shio in solving the crisis on Mist Source Island, he didn't know which big shot issued the order. At this moment, the one Tan Shio mentioned gave him a huge shock. Is it really number one? Yang Chuxiong was silent for a while before he hesitantly asked. Yes, it's him. Tan Shio nodded. Yang Chuxiong looked at Tan Shio with a complicated expression and said, if that's the case, then I won't stop you. But I'll personally accompany you around. If you run into danger. Tan Shio waved his hand to interrupt him and said, you need to stay here to stabilize the overall situation, Division Commander Yang. You can mobilize the troops in time in case some lawbreakers attack the army. As for my safety, do you think I don't have any ability since I'm valued by that person? Yang Chuxiong was rendered speechless by Tan Shio's rhetorical question. After observing Tan Shio for a long time, he forced a smile and said, I'm afraid that something might happen. Even if that person, there's still Senior Tang. If Elder Tang gets angry, I won't be able to handle it. Tan Shio said, since my grandpa dared to let me come here, he must have been prepared for trouble. So, he won't bother you. Yang Chuxiong finally compromised. How about this? I can choose not to follow you, but I'll send more people to follow you. Tan Shio asked, is there anyone else in the army who can follow me at any time? Yang Chuxiong's breathing stagnated as he bitterly smiled and said, you're right. Everyone in the army has been infected by the virus. Not to mention acting as guards, it's already good enough that they don't have a fever. By the way, when you came, didn't all the members of the Phantom Special Combat Team come along? Put them in charge of protecting you. I really don't, Tan Shio, it's decided. Otherwise, I won't feel at ease. Tan Shio's heart was filled with helplessness. He could not tell Yang Chuxiong that he was an immortal cultivator, nor could he tell him that the 11 subordinates he brought were all immortal cultivators. After learning about the threats from various forces, especially the Stygian Club, he realized that the ones he was about to face were not ordinary people. If he were to encounter the Stygian Club's assassins again, even 10 members of the Phantom Special Combat Team wouldn't be able to protect him. It would become a burden instead. However, looking at Yang Chuxiong's firm look, Tan Shio nodded with a headache. Half an hour later, after Yang Chuxiong temporarily found 4 black SUVs, Tan Shio directly boarded them and left with Mo and the others. As for the Phantom Special Combat Team following behind, he pretended not to know about them. Where are we going, boss? Mo was in charge of driving and asked after leaving the military camp. Have you investigated it clearly? Tan Shio asked. Where's the most central location of Mist Source Island? Mo asked. Zidane and Feng Yang went there personally and have investigated it clearly. It's more than 100 kilometers north of Mixed Summit City. Although the traffic in the 4 major cities has been opened, we still need to take a detour to avoid the mountains. It'll take us 4 or 5 hours to get there from here. We don't need to rush there if there's no Phantom Special Combat Team following us, Tan Shio said. But now, let's go and have a look first. Which car are Zidane and Feng Yang in? In the car behind us, said Mo. Pull over and park the car. Shui Sha, you and Zidane get off the car, said Tan Shio. I have something to ask him. All right. Shui Sha, who was sitting next to Tan Shio, nodded. Quickly. The thin Zidane hurriedly sat next to Tan Shio. After closing the door, he said, do you have something to ask me, boss? That's right. You and Feng Yang personally went to the most central mountain of Mist Source Island. Did you see the palace on the top? Asked Tan Shio. What's the situation over there? Mo asked. When we were far away, we observed it through binoculars. We can indeed see the palace. Although it's not magnificent, it's still majestic. However, when we were 600 meters away from the mountain, we were blocked by the fog. After another 100 meters or so, it was so dark that we couldn't even see our fingers in front of us. Moreover, there was a special air pressure that prevented us from going any further. In other words, even you can't go inside? Tan Xiu asked with a smile. We can't go inside, said Zidane with a forced smile. Although we don't know anything about arrays, we've been with you for a long time, boss, so we can tell that it's caused by arrays. It's already very good that we can go 100 meters inside the fog. If ordinary people were to go inside, I'm afraid they would be forced out by the air pressure inside after walking more than 10 meters inside. Is that all you've found? Tan Xiu thoughtfully asked. That's only part of it, boss. Dan immediately shook his head. We circled around the mountain and found a village near the south side of the mountain. There are 1,000 or 2,000 households living there. We also sneaked into the village to observe and found that there are foreign experts in the east, west, and south of the village. I don't know how they occupied several courtyards, but the defense is very tight. In addition, there are also people stationed on the north side of the mountain. There are nearly 100 people in total. They look like hired mercenaries. The leader is an old white man, and he's also a cripple. Have you found out their identities? Asked Tan Xiu. Apart from the more than 20 people stationed on the east side of the village, I screened them through the internet and finally determined that they are from the Mexican Mafia Reston organization. The leader is the second in command of the Reston organization, Jinlei Duomo. She's a ruthless character. We haven't investigated the other three forces. There are too few sources of information here. What are foreign gangsters doing on this island? Asked Tan Xiu with a frown. Dan didn't answer. He couldn't figure it out. In the early hours of the morning, the 2 cars of the Phantom Special Combat Squad members arrived at the Wolfpack City. If it was in the past, the streets on both sides of the streets of the Wolfpack City would be brightly lit, illuminating the surrounding buildings. But at this moment, it was different. The roads on both sides were dark. Although there was moonlight, it still looked quite dark. Only when they passed the intersection would the traffic lights be lit, radiating a little light to the road. However, usually, at this time, the residents would have already turned off the lights and gone to sleep. But now, every house had lights on, and they could occasionally see the figures of the residents who hadn't gone to bed yet from the windows. Boss, we're being watched. Mo, who was driving, suddenly had a cold light flash in his eyes. While observing the road ahead, he said vigilantly. Tan Xiu instantly released his divine sense, covering a radius of 300 or 400 meters. More than 300 meters behind the 6 cars, there was a car without lights following. On a tree on the side of the road, 2 men in black leather jackets were observing the convoy with binoculars. In addition, a young man on a roller skateboard was moving forward from the next street. His speed was very fast. In an instant, Tan Xiu could tell that the other party was definitely not an ordinary person. Even a Special Forces soldier couldn't match his speed with a roller skateboard. Keep going and find the hotels in the Wolfpack City. Tan Xiu indifferently said while monitoring with his divine sense. Boss, according to our understanding, all the hotels in the entire Mist Source Island have closed down and a small number of their staff have been fired. There are no people in those hotels at all, said Mo. I understand the current situation. Even if they can't provide services, at least there are empty rooms, said Tan Xiu lightly. Let's stay here tonight and continue our journey tomorrow morning. All right. At the Grand Hyatt Hotel. It was the tallest hotel in the Wolfpack City with a total of 5 floors. Except for a small number of rooms with lights on, the rest were all dark. The glass door of the hotel had already been locked with chains. Even the reception area on the first floor of the hotel was empty. After the 6 cars stopped, Mo easily opened the lock on the hotel's door. After pushing the door and entering, Tan Xiu and the rest stopped their pace with the faint light in the hall. I'll find someone to book a room for us, said Mo after looking around. Tan Xiu raised his hand to stop him and lightly said, Don't be anxious. Everyone, get ready for battle. We don't need to call them later. Some people will come down naturally. In a flash. Except for Mo Au, who stood vigilantly beside Tan Xiu, the other 10 experts of the everlasting feast hall instantly hid on both sides. They grabbed their sharp daggers and vigilantly watched the hotel's entrance and the corridor on both sides. Battle preparation. The members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad looked puzzled. They didn't find any special situation at all, so why would they need to prepare for battle? Yu Shuqing was puzzled, but he still quickly made a few hand gestures. As the bullets were loaded, they carried their guns and dispersed. Chapter 732. In the dimly lit lobby of the hotel, Tan Xiu stood in the center with his eyes locked on the hotel's entrance. The moment two middle-aged men in black leather jackets with grim expressions entered the door, the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad had already aimed their guns at them. Tan Xiu, Divine Dr. Tang. The yellow-haired middle-aged man in leather jackets on the left directly ignored the muzzles of the Phantom Special Combat Squad and stopped 7 or 8 meters away from Tan Xiu. "Tell me your background," said Tan Xiu indifferently. "You don't need to know our identity for the time being. You just need to know one thing. Tell your trash men to put down their guns and come with us alone. You'll naturally know who we are when we get there." "Preposterous, self-righteous fool." Tan Xiu sneered. "Don't tell me you don't know that running amok in our country's territory is a violation of our country's laws?" "The law is bullshit in front of us," said the middle-aged man with a gloomy face. "I hope Mr. Tang will speak politely. The fact that we can find you in time shows our ability. We've already given you enough face by inviting you with courtesy. There's an old saying in your country that you refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. I hope Mr. Tang won't make the same decision as this saying." "Are you threatening me?" asked Tan Xiu. "Since the soft approach doesn't work, we can only use the hard way," said the middle-aged man coldly. "But before that, I ask Mr. Tang to seize the last chance and come with us." Yu Shuqing pointed the muzzle at the yellow-haired middle-aged man's temple. He vigilantly approached the yellow-haired middle-aged man and said in a deep voice, "Mr. Tang won't go with you. You must consider the consequences before you act." The middle-aged man turned his head and observed Yu Shuqing. He then nodded and said, "No wonder Mr. Tang is so fearless. It turns out that you have experts protecting you. If I'm not mistaken, these should be the special soldiers of the Chinese military, right? Since we're going to use force, why don't we have some appetizers first? Let's have a spar, shall we?" After saying that, he clapped his hands. And immediately, 8 men in suits with sabers on their backs flashed in from outside the door. They exuded a cold aura and quickly stood in a row behind the thin middle-aged man. Yu Shuqing vaguely felt that these people were not ordinary. After pondering for a moment, he took a step back and said in a deep voice, "Gangzi, come and play with them." The Phantom Special Combat Squad's Wei Qinggang, whose fighting level was second only to Yu Shuqing, handed the gun in his hand to Mo Xiaonan beside him. He then quickly removed the other equipment on his body and twisted his neck. With a cracking sound, he took a few steps forward and sneered, "Who wants to play?" The thin middle-aged man sneered and raised his right hand to hook his finger forward. A man on the far left of the row took a few steps forward and came in front of Wei Qinggang. He then spoke in English, "I'm the weakest in my squad, but it's not a problem for me to deal with you. Come, let me see the strength of China's special forces." Wei Qinggang assumed a fighting stance and sneered, "Don't bite your tongue when you're boasting. Bring it on." Tan Xiu secretly shook his head. The hidden experts of the Stygian Club were absolutely innumerable. The assassins he encountered in Laoshan Mountain in Chengxi City were all heterogeneous with terrifying strength. But the thin middle-aged man in front of him and the guy next to him were not human. Their strength was very likely very strong. As for the 8 men of the thin middle-aged man, each of them had a strong smell of blood on them. Their killing intent surged and released a strong murderous aura, proving that they were very strong. At the very least, they were battle-hardened experts. Wei Qinggang. He's probably not that guy's match. However, Tan Xiu didn't intend to remind Wei Qinggang since he didn't have a good impression of these guys from the Phantom Special Combat Squad. Especially at this moment, he didn't even open his mouth, yet Yu Shuqing, the captain, jumped out and made his men fight with the opponent. This was simply stupid. At the same time, Tan Xiu also had another purpose. It would be best if all the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad were injured. That way, they wouldn't have to follow him like a tail and wouldn't affect his actions on Mist Source Island. At this time, Wei Qinggang was full of confidence. He had won the championship in fighting in 2 consecutive military region tournaments. Even though he attached great importance to the enemy, he still unconsciously believed that the opponent couldn't beat him. Seeing that the opponent didn't take the initiative to attack, he was too lazy to be modest. His footsteps instantly sprinted and fiercely kicked the opponent. If an ordinary person was hit by his kick, they would be seriously injured even if they didn't die. Too slow. The man shook his head and muttered to himself. He grabbed Wei Qinggang's ankle with lightning speed and kicked the inner thigh of Wei Qinggang's other leg. In the blink of an eye, he punched Wei Qinggang's face with his other fist. Bam! Wei Qinggang, who was full of confidence, was sent flying by the opponent's punch. He was dizzy and fell under the wall at the side. Had it not been for his strong resistance, he would have been knocked out by the opponent's heavy punch. One move. The winner was directly decided. The man, with a disdainful expression, spat at the place where Wei Qinggang fell. He didn't pursue the victory, nor did he kill him. With disdain, he returned behind the thin middle-aged man, put his hands behind his back again, and no longer looked at Wei Qinggang. The members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad were dumbfounded. They looked at the man who defeated Wei Qinggang as if they were looking at a monster. They knew each other well and naturally knew how strong Wei Qinggang's fighting strength was. But they couldn't figure out why Wei Qinggang was defeated by the opponent in just one move. Yu Shuqing's heart was violently shaken. The other members of the Phantom Special Combat Squadron did not clearly see the enemy's attack route. They only felt that the opponent's speed was very fast and his strength was sufficient. However, he clearly captured the opponent's attack route and judged the opponent's terrifying speed. So fast. So strong. No one in the entire Phantom Special Combat Squad is his opponent. Even if I burst out with my strongest attack, I'm afraid I can't defeat that guy. Whether it's strength or speed, the opponent is too strong. Yu Shuqing looked at Tan Xiu with shame. He began to secretly regret that he shouldn't have jumped out prematurely to protect Tan Xiu. Only at this moment did he realize that Tan Xiu had never uttered a word since the moment he stood up. He didn't say a word, nor did he express any attitude. Tan Xiu glanced at Yu Shuqing's expression and completely grasped his mentality. After a moment of silence, Tan Xiu lightly said, "Victory and defeat are common in the military. This failure doesn't mean that we will fail again and again in the future. As long as our ambition remains undiminished and we continue to work hard in the future, I believe that the day of victory will come sooner or later. But since I'm the person in charge of Mist Source Island, no one can jump out and ask for a snub without my order in the future." "I understand." Yu Shuqing nodded bitterly. Tan Xiu shifted to the thin middle-aged man and lightly said, "Since you want to fight first, then I'll accompany you to the end. Xue Sha, come out and play with him." Xue Sha flashed out from the corner of the corridor and instantly appeared at Tan Xiu's side. He cupped his fists and walked to the middle of the two parties, grinning hideously and said, "I always felt that fighting and killing was very boring. I didn't expect to meet so many experts today. It seems that we'll have some fun. Hey, brat, come out and let's have a fight." The thin middle-aged man hooked his finger at his subordinate and indifferently said, "It's not the last moment yet, so there's no need to turn hostile and kill. However, don't be too lenient. It's fine if you don't die, but you must be seriously injured." "Got it," replied the man. He glanced at Xue Sha contemptuously and instantly dashed forward. In nearly the blink of an eye, he had already dashed to the front of Xue Sha. He suddenly slapped his palm and instantly attacked Xue Sha's face. "You're too slow." Xue Sha sneered and his figure instantly turned into an afterimage. Before the man could react, his palm had already penetrated Xue Sha's phantom. Just as the man's determined strike failed, his expression slightly changed and he was about to launch a second round of attacks, but he was directly slapped to the ground by a pair of palms that he couldn't see clearly. Then, Xue Sha kicked the man's abdomen with a seemingly light and floaty kick at the man's waist while his body was moving on the ground. One move. It was the same move, yet Xue Sha had severely injured the man. The man's body was pushed back 7 to 8 meters on the ground and eventually hit the wall. Blood flowed from his head and he directly fainted. What? The thin middle-aged man and his other companions' complexion turned extremely ugly, as though they had eaten a dead fly from their meal. They were nearly angered to death. However, they also realized Xue Sha's terrifying power at this moment. The Phantom Special Combat Squad. Mo Xiaonan stared blankly at the enemy who was defeated by Xue Sha in one move. He then looked at Wei Qinggang, who had already stood up while trembling. He suddenly touched Chen Yangfan with his arm and said in a low voice, "Tell me, I'm dreaming." "It's not a dream." Chen Yangfan tightly clenched his fists. His eyes were full of fanaticism as he fixedly stared at Xue Sha. The others, however, looked incredulous with lofty respect faintly mixed in their eyes. They didn't expect that one of Tan Xiu's men could casually stand up and defeat the enemy. Mo Xiaonan pinched his thigh and muttered with a trembling voice, "Just now, Gangzi was defeated by someone in one move." But the one who defeated Gangzi in one move was actually defeated by one of Tan Xiu's men. What does this mean? If Tan Xiu's man wants to deal with Gangzi, I'm afraid it won't be much more difficult than crushing an ant. Xue Sha looked at his unconscious opponent with some regret. He then turned to look at Tan Xiu and smilingly said, "Boss, since they want to pick a fight with us, it's better for me to clean them up first. Else, it'll be very annoying if they keep surrounding us like flies." Chapter 733. A smile outlined on the corner of Tan Xiu's mouth. How could he not understand the hidden meaning in Xue Sha's words? It was necessary to deal with these guys in front of him, but the most important thing was to make the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad leave. Otherwise, once those non-humans from the Stygian Club appeared, they would definitely expose their identity as cultivators. "Xue Sha, if they have the guts, then you can exercise your muscles." Xue Sha nodded with a smile. Then, he looked at the Stygian Club's people and proudly said, "My boss said that you flies are very annoying. If you want to show off your strength, then clamp your balls in your crotch and come out. I'll fight all of you alone." The thin middle-aged man's face was gloomy as he fiercely stared at Xue Sha. He had the bloodline of a werewolf, so he naturally had great strength. Aside from the experts of his clan around him, the rest of his 7 subordinates were all humans. Although they also practiced strange cultivation techniques, their strength was not particularly strong. It wouldn't be a problem for them to deal with ordinary humans, but they could only be beaten up once they encountered a real alien race powerhouse. However, he had his own pride, and he would never allow his subordinates to be cowards. Although this guy named Xue Sha was very strong, it wasn't impossible for his 7 subordinates to fight him if they joined forces. "Go, kill him." The thin middle-aged man clenched his fists and shouted. The 7 experts from the Stygian Club were shocked upon hearing his order. The moment they heard Xue Sha's words, their hearts were filled with killing intent and they couldn't wait to get the order to kill him. Whoosh, the 7 men stepped forward and instantly pulled out the sabers tied to their backs from the scabbards. Their neat movements and chilling blades filled the air with an austere aura. Xue Sha slightly frowned. Despite being bold and skillful, he was still vigilant. The Everlasting Feast Hall had a unique battle array that could unleash a formidable power as long as many people cooperated with it. However, these 7 people in front of him had a tacit understanding and were likely to know how to combine such an array. 7 stars alignment. The 7 people's footsteps suddenly moved. As the sound that came out from the gaps between their teeth faded away, the 7 people turned into afterimages and instantly enveloped Xue Sha. Their speed was originally not very fast, but they cooperated with each other. Their sabers constantly collided and their palms slapped their companions' shoulders in the same order and direction, causing their speed to soar a lot. You need companions to help you. Shueisha raised his eyebrows and his dignified expression suddenly changed. A smile appeared in his mind as he instantly threw a dart and accurately hit one of the sabers. It was also at this moment that a gap appeared in the battle formation that borrowed force to accelerate. Break for me. Like a shadow, Shueisha swept the dagger in his hand along the gaps in the battle formation. With the force of a small force, two sabers were bounced off. The dagger in Shueisha's hand seemed to have a life of its own as it stabbed into the left rib of one of the men in a tricky and strange path. Ah! Just as the shrill screams were heard, 2 lines of blood appeared on the necks of 2 of them. Along with the opening of their necks, blood spurted wildly. Shueisha was like a tiger entering a flock of sheep. The dagger in his hand kept flying, leaving bloody shadows behind. He was suppressing his speed, yet he was still nearly twice as fast as the people from the Stygian club. When experts exchanged blows, the advantage of nearly double the speed was definitely a one-sided massacre. 15 seconds. It only took Shueisha 15 seconds to return to Tan Xiu after throwing the dart, completely ending the battle. Bam! 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 7 bodies fell to the ground, convulsing for more than 10 seconds while blood splashed everywhere, and then completely lost their vitality. The thin middle-aged man clenched his fists so hard that they turned white. His eyes flashed with crazy killing intent. A surging aura emanated from him as he stared at Shueisha, as though he would attack at any time. How could this be? That was what he thought. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that of the 8 subordinates he had personally trained, 7 had died and 1 was injured in such a short period of time. The members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad were equally dumbfounded. The moment the 7 Stygian Club members formed their battle formation, they had already realized the strength of the other party. Yet, the 7 of them were unexpectedly killed by Shueisha in such a short time. Such strength and means were definitely much stronger than theirs. Is he still human? Chen Yangfan's mouth twitched a few times as he couldn't help but murmur in a low voice. Suddenly, he recalled the time when he was in Demonic City. The guy who put a dagger on his neck like a ghost. Could it be them? Chen Yangfan's pupils instantly shrunk and his eyes quickly landed on Tan Xiu. Tan Xiu came from China and set off together from Demonic City. That guy who was as fast as lightning was also in Demonic City at that time. There was definitely a close connection between the two. Having figured it out, Chen Yangfan immediately came to Yu Shuqing's side and whispered, "It's them, Captain." Chen Yangfan's words made Yu Shuqing stare blankly and confused. "What do you mean? Do you still remember when I was tracking mouse and someone put a dagger on my neck?" Chen Yangfan said in a low voice. "I suspect that person was Tan Xiu's man. You've also seen this Shueisha guy's speed. He's too fast." Yu Shuqing's expression slightly changed. After carefully thinking about it, he felt that Chen Yangfan's conjecture was very reasonable. There were a lot of coincidences in it, and if they were to be connected, it should be them. But then, why did Tan Xiu look for mouse? Did he also want to buy intel? Put this matter aside for now. Yu Shuqing could sense that the thin middle-aged man was about to erupt, so he immediately raised his gun and spoke in a low voice. Tan Xiu glanced at the thin middle-aged man with a faint smile and looked satisfied. He then nodded to Shueisha and said, "Well done. Your strength has improved, hasn't it?" "It's a small breakthrough," said Shueisha with a smile. "All right. You don't need to do anything for the rest." Tan Xiu nodded. "If these 2 want to do it themselves, there will be someone to play with them." The thin middle-aged man took a deep breath and directly suppressed his killing intent. Then, he said in a deep voice, "We'll give you one last chance now, Tan Xiu. If you agree to go with us, some of your men will die. But don't blame us for being ruthless if you still insist on going your own way." "I, Tan Xiu, am afraid of anything, but threats. Tan Xiu laughed. Bring it on if you have the ability. But once you expose something that shouldn't be exposed in front of ordinary people, I'm afraid this matter will quickly spread out. It'll be very difficult for you to clean up the mess by then. No one will know if ordinary people die, said the thin middle-aged man with a murderous aura. As his voice faded away, the middle-aged man beside him instantly pounced towards the 7 members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad. Before he could reach Yu Shuqing, who was at the forefront, his wolf teeth were exposed, and his eyes had already turned green. Even on his originally dark skin, strands of hair continuously drilled out, and at a speed visible to the naked eye, he turned into a humanoid beast. Wolf. Stimulating one's bloodline could temporarily cause one's strength to double. Tang Xiu had seen a werewolf in Mount Lao who had stimulated his bloodline to return to its ancestral state, so he didn't feel anything strange about it. The 7 members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad, however, were shocked by the werewolf's transformation. At this moment, except for Yu Shuqing, who could still pull the trigger and shoot subconsciously, the rest were all dumbfounded. Mo's burly figure instantly dashed forward and unleashed his immortal sword. The moment the werewolf's sharp claws were about to tear Yu Shuqing's head, he fiercely slashed the sharp claws. As blood splashed on Yu Shuqing's face, the werewolf's other sharp claws swept 4 bloody wounds on Yu Shuqing's chest. Roar! The skinny middle-aged man's body also changed. As the clothes on his back were torn apart, 2 wings instantly spread out, and a dark red feather crown grew on his forehead. Flames instantly shot out from his eyes. At the same time, the feathers on the 2 wings shot out one by one, covering the sky and shooting toward Tan Xiu and Xue Sha. The flames touched the feathers and formed a fire arrow. Even the surrounding temperature suddenly soared at this moment. Whoosh! 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 8 figures instantly appeared in front of Tan Xiu. Together with Xue Sha, they unleashed their flying swords. When the sky was filled with layers of sword shadows, the fire arrows were instantly smashed. The swift and fierce sword chi formed a sword net, pouncing toward the thin middle-aged man who had transformed into a winged man, a cultivator from Huaxia. The winged man's complexion changed dramatically. As if he had realized something, his figure instantly retreated. When he appeared behind Mo, his wings turned into light blades and fiercely swept toward the back of Mo's neck. You're courting death. Mo's cultivation was the highest among them except for Tan Xiu. Feeling the wind coming from behind him, he instantly rushed toward the werewolf. The flying swords rotated and strangled the werewolf, forcing him to retreat to the middle of Yu Shuqing and the others. Tut, 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 the muzzles of the 7 guns spat out fire snakes. The bullets were fired as if they were free, and most of the bullets shot into the werewolf's body. Roar! The winged man suddenly roared and grabbed a syringe from his waist. The moment he fiercely smashed it toward Mo, the 2 pairs of wings instantly disappeared without a trace, and the silver-red feather crown on his forehead directly dissipated. As his eyeballs turned dark green, hair drilled out of his body, and sharp claws grew wildly from his fingers. He, who was originally a winged man, unexpectedly turned into a werewolf in just a few breaths. What a strange change. Although Tan Xiu was experienced and knowledgeable, he was still shocked and tongue-tied. A winged man has turned into a werewolf? What kind of monster is this? Tan Xiu took a deep breath. At this moment, he brazenly made a move. The long sword suspended in the Dantian world was instantly unleashed by him. In an instant, it turned into a flowing light and pierced the guy's back. Run! A roar came from the monster whose heart had been pierced. Chapter 734. The monster that had turned from a wingman into a werewolf endured the fatal injury and dashed to the front of Mo with its powerful body. It unleashed a suicidal attack and crazily rushed toward Mo. The other werewolf, whose claw had been cut off, instantly fled outside. Catch them! Tan Xiu instantly retrieved his flying sword and shouted fiercely. Mo roared and bombarded the monster's face with a fistful of tyrannical aura. The sharp claws tore open 8 bloody wounds on his body. At this moment, the flying sword he unleashed flew back and directly cut off the monster's head. Whoosh! Whoosh! 10 figures flickered lightning fast and chased after the fleeing werewolf. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared from the hotel's entrance. The gunshots had stopped. The Phantom Special Combat Squad's captain, Yu Shuqing, and the other 6 members of the squad retreated at the same time. Their backs leaned against the wall as they looked at the headless corpse in front of them with lingering fear. In this lifetime, they had seen countless battles and participated in countless battles, but none of them could compare to this one. Even if they were just bystanders this time, they were just bystanders. These monsters. Mo Xiaonan wiped the blood that splashed on his face and murmured in a trembling voice. In the past, he always thought that as long as he had a gun in his hand, he wouldn't be afraid even if the devil appeared in front of him. But just now, he was scared out of his wits. Cough, cough, they're like the werewolves and birdmen in the movies. Yu Shuqing wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, but he didn't bother to deal with the bleeding wound on his chest. His eyes were full of vigilance and the muzzle of his gun was aimed at the hotel's entrance. Tan Xiu came to Mo Ao's side and looked at the wound on his chest. He then took out a holy healing pill and stuffed it into his mouth. Then, he said in a deep voice, "Your main task is to heal yourself. Hurry up and heal. I'm afraid there will be a lot of fights coming up." Mo Ao nodded without a word and directly walked to the corner and sat cross-legged. Tan Xiu came to Yu Shuqing and lightly said, "Deal with your injuries. Those Stygian Club's heretics are not people you can deal with. So, as I said before, I really don't need your protection. As long as you can protect yourselves, that's already the greatest help you can give me." The faces of Yu Shuqing and the other members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad alternated between green and white, and thick shame lingered in their hearts. Previously, when Tan Xiu said that he didn't need their protection, they thought that Tan Xiu was too arrogant and reckless. Only now did they understand that they weren't courting death at all. They were simply looking down on them. People. He was looking down on them. Yu Shuqing and the others looked at each other. Apart from a bitter smile and helplessness, there was only a strong sense of humiliation surging in their hearts. Their pride, their complacency, and their self-confidence had all been crushed to smithereens. Tan Xiu did not say anything more to provoke them. After all, they were all ordinary people, and they were once true warriors who dedicated themselves to the country. Gently patting Yu Shuqing's shoulder, Tan Xiu said, "Mist Source Island is now beset with crisis everywhere, and the garrison is facing a huge crisis. I think you should stay in the garrison base with your ability. As for the foreign forces on Mist Source Island, just leave them to me." Yu Shuqing was silent for a moment and said with difficulty, "I'll explain the situation to Division Commander Yang and Chief of Staff Hu. As long as they issue the order, we'll immediately return to the garrison base." Tan Xiu shook his head and said, "No need to report to them. I'll explain it to them personally later. However, there's one thing I hope you can do me a favor." "What favor?" asked Yu Shuqing quickly. "Keep it a secret," said Tan Xiu. "Whatever you see today must not be spread out, let alone reported to your superiors. I know you're loyal and patriotic soldiers, but you must accept orders." Yu Shuqing fell into silence. With a complicated expression, Mo Xiaonan said, "You mean, we must accept your orders?" "A secret order?" "That's right," said Tan Xiu indifferently. "We're just temporarily obeying your orders, but we have no responsibility," said Mo Xiaonan. Tan Xiu raised his hand to interrupt him and coldly said, "There are some things I didn't want to say, but it seems that I can only warn you now. The one who sent me to Mist Source Island this time is the #1 leader of the country. Who do you think has more power than him in the entire country? Also, I'll tell you one more thing. Maybe I wouldn't have come if it was just the #1 leader. You've just heard what my enemies said about my identity. As cultivators, what we pursue is power and longevity. We comprehend the heavenly Tao laws and cultivate the heart sword that cuts off the mortal world. But this time, aside from the number one leader, my grandfather also came to ask me to come here. I don't need to hide it from you. Tang Guosheng is my grandfather, and the Tang family in the imperial capital is my family. Do you think it's necessary to report what happened today? All the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad looked at each other in dismay with shock on their faces. Never in their dreams did they expect that it was the number one leader who sent Tan Xiu here, much less that he was Tang Guosheng's grandson. No wonder. No wonder the two leaders sent you to solve the crisis on Mist Source Island. As cultivators, I'm afraid only you can deal with the foreign races. We'll treat this matter as a top military secret. Unless the number one leader asks, we'll never divulge half a word about it, said Yu Shuqing solemnly. Tan Xiu slightly nodded and said, let's stay here for the time being tonight. There are many dangers outside, and I'm afraid the news of us coming here has already been known by many forces. If my guess is correct, I'm afraid it won't be peaceful tonight. Who are you? Two middle-aged men in security uniforms came out from the side corridor of the hall. They had flashlights in their hands and a confused look on their faces. However, when the security guard on the left asked, he suddenly exclaimed in horror, "Oh God! Murder! There are dead people here!" His voice faded away. The two men ran away with fear written all over their faces. Nearly exhausting all their strength, they quickly disappeared into the corridor. Tan Xiu couldn't help laughing and said, "You go with them and solve the problem here. I'll stand outside for a while and then come back to take us to our rooms." Understood. Yu Shuqing nodded. Tan Xiu took out a cigarette, lit it up, and walked out of the hotel's entrance. He looked at the empty night outside and constantly spread his spiritual sense to the surroundings. With his current ability, it wouldn't be a problem for him to release it up to 500 to 600 meters away. However, what made him slightly worried was that Xue Sha, Jin Shi, and the others had gone to chase the werewolf and had disappeared from the range of his spiritual sense. Don't worry, boss. Even if Jin Shi and the others encounter danger, they can still escape if they can't beat the enemy. Using flying swords to escape is the fastest. Apart from some skin wounds, Mo didn't have any major problems. His bloody wounds had also healed a lot at this moment. I've always had a bad feeling about this, but I can't tell why. Tan Xiu shook his head. Also, the guy we just killed is a bit strange. You mean, he showed the characteristics of a winged man at first, but then suddenly turned into a werewolf? Asked Mo. That's right, answered Tan Xiu. After hesitating for a moment, Mo said, I think it should be caused by a potion, boss. That monster hit me with a syringe, and I found some residual green liquid inside the syringe. After I killed it, I examined its body. There was a tiny needle hole in its lower ribs, and there was some dark green residue in its body. If it's really caused by a potion, then it's really interesting, said Tan Xiu with a strange expression. A werewolf can turn into a winged man, which means that the Western foreign races are not at peace. Don't you think that if such a potion really exists, it's the best way to frame someone after an assassination? Indeed. Mo let out a hollow laugh. Suddenly, both of them looked to the southeast at the same time. Aside from the 10 figures flying fast on flying swords, there were also pursuers behind them. 4 vampires flapped their wings and held strange weapons in their hands, bombarding them with terrifying attacks again and again. Go support them. Tan Xiu instantly soared into the sky. The moment the long sword in his body was unleashed, he brushed past his 10 fleeing subordinates. Immediately after, he raised his arm high and the long sword turned into a 100-meter-long light shadow, fiercely slashing toward the 4 pursuing vampires. The earth-shattering sword seemed to tear open the barrier of space. Countless types of energy swarmed in from all directions, merging into the lightning-fast sword shadow. In 1/100th of a second, the power of this sword had increased by several times. Retreat! A sharp roar came from the mouth of one of the vampires, and his tone was filled with intense panic. In an instant, the 4 vampires frantically retreated. Puff! 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 Their speed was very fast, but the lightning-fast sword shadow was even faster. With an overwhelming momentum, it instantly slashed the 4 vampires who were blocking with their weapons. The 4 vampires were like a lone boat in a turbulent sea. They spurted blood and were sent flying hundreds of meters away, smashing large holes in several buildings. Ghost Dom Miasma. A vampire rushed out of the broken building and sprayed out a pitch-black smoke. In just a few breaths, the black smoke frantically spread and enveloped the scenery within a radius of half a kilometer. The 4 vampires then drilled into the dark warrior's body and disappeared. Tan Xiu tightly frowned. He found that his spiritual sense was blocked when it came into contact with the black mist. With no other choice, he could only retract his spiritual sense and quickly circled to another direction to chase the place where the 4 vampires disappeared. A few minutes later, Tan Xiu returned to the hotel's entrance. He looked at Jin Shi and the others, who looked quite distressed. Tan Xiu frowned and asked, "What's the origin of those 4 vampires?" Chapter 735. Tan Xiu's all-out attack failed to directly kill the 4 vampires and only heavily injured them. Tan Xiu was somewhat shocked. He had learned about the classification of vampires from Shanjena. Therefore, he inferred that the 4 vampires were at least at the Count rank. A Count. Shanjena once told him that there were no more than 20 vampires in the entire Western vampire race who could reach the Count rank. But today, 4 of them appeared all of a sudden, causing Tan Xiu to be more cautious. They should belong to the Stygian Club, boss. We had already heavily injured that werewolf, but he was saved by those 4 vampires, said Jin Shi bitterly. Tan Xiu slowly nodded and said, "Those 4 vampires are very powerful. If I don't use some of my trump cards, it will be very difficult for me to severely injure or kill them. Our real enemies have now appeared, so we must be careful in our next actions. Otherwise, we're likely to die on this Mist Source Island." Understood. Everyone replied with a solemn expression. Immediately after, Tan Xiu led everyone back to the hotel, whereas Yu Shuqing led the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad to find the current manager of the hotel, a pale middle-aged man. "Mr. Tang, the room is ready. You can check in at any time." "This is the room card," said Yu Shuqing respectfully as he handed over a stack of room cards. Tan Xiu ignored the hotel manager. He took the room card, found the room, and then directly stayed there. In the forest outside the city, dozens of kilometers away from the hotel, 4 vampires with one of their wings cut off were hiding in the bushes with lingering fear. Meanwhile, the heavily injured werewolf was struggling and roaring in front of the 4 vampires. However, all the blood essence in his body was completely devoured by the 4 vampires in just half a minute, causing him to die directly. "Damn it!" One of the vampires wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and kicked the werewolf's shriveled body away. Then, he angrily said, "That bastard is too strong. We're not his match even if the 4 of us join forces. Hence, the possibility of capturing him is 0. Another vampire with bloody eyes said, "He's a Chinese cultivator. Legend has it that he's the descendant of the immortals of the Middle East and has mysterious and unfathomable abilities. Back then, during the Crusades, they were beaten miserably by the Eastern cultivators. I didn't expect that we would actually encounter cultivators from the East. We need to report this matter to the leader." I saw it. A hazy black shadow suddenly appeared. It was a pale-faced young man dressed entirely in black. His 2 fangs were sharp, and his entire body was emitting a sinister wind. In his hand, there was a black metal sphere. His cold and indifferent expression didn't fluctuate in the slightest as his blood-red eyes swept over the dead werewolf corpse dozens of meters away. "Leader." The 4 vampires knelt and bowed. Bowles was the name of the young vampire. He was also a trusted subordinate of Keith Moore, one of the 8 bigwigs of the Stygian Club. "We must complete Lord Keith Moore's order without hesitation, even if it means sacrificing our lives to Ancestor Cain. The Eastern cultivator, Tan Xiu, is indeed very strong. That sword attack of his was very powerful. Even if I was hit by it, I would probably be severely injured. Hence, there's only one way to capture him alive, and that's to use blood poison. Having said that, Bowles took out a porcelain bottle and handed it to one of the vampires, saying, "You're to move in the dark and put the blood poison in his food without him noticing. Even if he's an Eastern cultivator, his power will be imprisoned for a short time once he eats the food with blood poison, turning him into a powerless reptile." The 4 vampires stared at the porcelain bottle with fear in their eyes. As blood kin, they were naturally aware of the power of the blood poison. Even if they were vampire-level powerhouses, their power would be weakened by half once they were poisoned by the blood poison. As for the other races, they would lose all their power once they were poisoned. Even if they could live for a few more days, they would still die without a doubt. "We'll definitely accomplish the mission, leader," the vampire holding the porcelain bottle said solemnly. "According to the intelligence I got, Wisdom War Elder Wu Jia, one of the pyramid's 10 war elders, has recently sent his men to secretly study the antidote for the darkening virus. Once his men succeed in their research, it will greatly affect our plan. According to His Excellency's deduction, Wisdom War Elder Wu Jia will definitely send his men to obstruct our operation to capture Tan Xiu. Pay attention to the pyramid's people when you carry out the mission and kill them immediately once you find them." "Understood." The 4 vampires' complexions slightly changed and they replied with a murderous aura. At the Grand Hyatt Hotel, Tan Xiu sat cross-legged on the bed and silently practiced the heavenly art of cosmic genesis. With the changes in the space in his dantian, the primal chaos force he possessed had become more massive. If he used it continuously before, he would only be able to use it for 2 hours. But now, he could definitely use it for more than 10 hours. However, after this change, he also found that it was quite a headache for him. It would be much more difficult for him to increase his physical strength in the future, and he would need to absorb more star force. He couldn't even see the end of it. After all, the world in his dantian was very big with hundreds of millions of planets. If each of them were to grow to the size of a real planet in the universe, he wouldn't be able to do it even after 10,000 years with his current cultivation speed. "I originally thought that I would be invincible on Earth after cultivating the heavenly art of cosmic genesis to the peak of the viscera transformation stage. But I didn't expect that there are not only other cultivators on Earth, but also vampires and beastmen with terrifying strength. Since a vampire count's strength was on par with mine, a vampire marquis's strength would probably be on par with mine. In case I encounter a vampire duke or even a higher-level vampire lord, I'm afraid I have no other way but to escape." Tan Xiu opened his eyes, got out of bed, and walked to the window. He looked at the faint light in the sky outside and pondered in silence. He had a lot of means to fight and escape. But even if he could escape alive in front of a real powerhouse, he would most likely be injured. Not to mention, he also brought Mo and the others to Mist Source Island. If he really encountered danger, he would never abandon Mo and the others and escape alone. Therefore, time to refine an array disc. Tan Xiu closed the curtains, took out a large number of jade materials from the interspatial ring, and began to refine an array disc. Currently, his strength was very low, and he was still unable to set up a powerful formation in a very short period of time. Only with the help of a formation plate could he form a powerful formation in an instant, which could be used to trap or kill the enemy. For 2 days, Tan Xiu didn't eat, drink, or sleep. He went all out to refine array discs. In these 2 days, he refined a total of 50 array discs, among which the most powerful was the Star Glory array. Tan Xiu was confident that even if he encountered a vampire duke, he could kill him with the help of this array. The door was closed by Tan Xiu. As he stepped out of the corridor, he saw Mo, Jinshi, and the others sitting cross-legged on the floor. After they got up, Tan Xiu asked, "Did the Phantom Special Combat Squad leave?" "They haven't left yet. They said they'll go back after we leave," said Mo. "Then let's go," Tan Xiu said. "Let's bypass the mixed summit city and go to that mountain. If there are people following us, we'll let them follow us as long as they don't attack us." Aren't we going to solve it directly? Mo all was confused. Don't you think it's better to kill enemies in the deep mountains and forests than in the city? Tan Xiu said. Mo all stared blankly for a moment before he immediately understood Tan Xiu's meaning and said, "You don't want to expose your identity in front of ordinary people, boss. We know what to do." Shortly after, everyone came to the lobby on the first floor. When Tan Xiu saw Yu Shuqing and the others waiting there, he immediately said, "Don't forget what we said before. I'll treat your Phantom Special Combat Squad to a drink when we go back. We'll prepare a banquet and wait for your triumphant return," said Yu Shuqing quickly. Tan Xiu let out a faint smile and strode out of the hotel's entrance. At this moment, the feeling of being monitored arose spontaneously again. However, he ignored it and didn't even release his spiritual sense to observe. After sitting in the cars, the 4 cars quickly left. After 2 hours of travel, the 4 cars had bypassed the Mixed Summit City and were only a dozen kilometers away from the mountain in the center of Mist Source Island. From here, they could vaguely see the mountain shrouded in clouds and mist more than 10 kilometers away. However, the summit was shrouded in clouds and mist, so they couldn't see the majestic palace. "Boss, there are 2 groups of people following us from both sides." After a long time of observation, Mo, who was driving, finally couldn't help but report. "Let them continue to follow us." Tan Xiu sneered. "I'd like to see what their ultimate purpose is." Mo nodded and sped up a lot at this moment. With the passage of time, they soon came to a place a few kilometers away from the foot of the mountain. "How high is this mountain?" After getting off the car, Tan Xiu looked up at the mountain and asked. "We've visually measured it before, but the result was very helpless. There's no way to visually estimate the exact height, but we can infer that it's at least a kilometer high," said Zidane. Tan Xiu looked at the mist shrouding the mountainside to the foot of the mountain, while the mountainside to the mountaintop was clearly visible. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. The mountain was indeed shrouded by a huge array, and this array was very mysterious. Even if he hadn't entered it before, he couldn't see through the mystery of this array. "Leave the car here and follow me. We'll try to go in." "Boss, I'm afraid we can't go in for the time being." Mo's eyes were full of killing intent as he stared at the left rear. He instantly unleashed his flying sword and it kept hovering around him. "You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.